Well, I'd like to tell you a little about Rosedale, where I was really raised at. We moved out there in 1920. Beforehand, we had lived in Cambridge City, but my uncle got a job at the Rosedale Baptist Church, and so all our relatives moved, and we did too. And while we were there, the Bethlehem started bringing in Mexicans, Negroes by transportation until this happened until I think about 1923. We had our one school, and we had a church, a Baptist church in Rosedale, and a two-room schoolhouse. We had two black teachers. One was Miss Norma, she was from the Washington, D.C., and one was Professor Swanston. They had, at one time, the hunters had a club up at the upper end, and then they dammed up the creek and they had made a little swimming hole out there.
A lot of people moved to Rosedale from other sections of Johnstown that worked in Bethlehem Steel. It was camera steel at that time. It was beautiful. They supplied us with coal, wood during the winter by having a couple of carloads of coal dumped along the tracks from up to down the hall all the way up. Wood the same. We kids used to go up with bags and load the coal and wood up and roll it down the tracks to our home. Later on, we get it, put it in our coal bins. But Rosedale was a beautiful place at that time. We had, I would say, a store across the creek up the holler named Simmons Store, owned by Black. They had a store further up called Payton. It was owned by a white man. But we traded at different stores. Payton had more of a supplies of different varieties of food than Simmons. Simmons was a smaller store, but we got along well. We had one black church, a Baptist church. Pastor was Reverend Robertson. We had two schools, a black school and a white school. And we seemed to get along. We never had any racial problems or nothing like that. The school, when you was out of school, you was right just like in this yard and that yard. That's how close the schools were together. But we never had any problems with names calling, nothing like that.
100 years ago this year, Johnstown's Rosedale banishment made headlines around the world. It was a move by the city's mayor in September 1923 after a black man killed 4 police officers in a shootout. Up for re-election, he took advantage of the outrage many white residents harbored over the incident.
And he decided that any black or brown people that have been in the city for less than 7 years were to be banished from Johnstown. And more than 2,000 African Americans and Mexican Americans left town. And it impacted the community of black folks you have here today.
The mayor's edict also banned black and Hispanic people from moving to Johnstown and barred blacks in the city from gathering except for church. The local chapter of Ku Klux Klan showed support for Mayor Joseph Cauffiel's actions by lighting the foggy night sky with 14 burning crosses spread across the hills surrounding Johnstown.
Christmas lights, burning crosses, gotta have something to light up the sky. The Worthless Negro from Virginia, some similar languaging in this here book. We'll get to that later. Gus T in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Tuesday, December 23, 2025. So I have been told. Our broadcast for today, if folks recall, last Wednesday, we had Dr. Emily Leib as a guest on the program. We were discussing her brand new book, 2025, Road to Nowhere. She was discussing white supremacy, racism in Baltimore, and she was talking about how they used the highway system deliberately, strategically mow down all of these black properties, black houses, totally destroy an area where black people live. During the course of the dialogue, Dr. Leib, she was joining us, white woman, she was joining us here in Washington State, and she was talking, somehow her grandparents came up. We were talking about Pennsylvania somehow. So we're talking about Baltimore, but she says her grandparents lived in Beaver County. That's it. Grandparents lived in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. And I've never been to Beaver County, but as I said, begrudgingly, one of the books that is in my top 10, top 3, begrudgingly, James Loewen, Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of Segregation in America. Wow, such an important book for so many reasons. Anyway, because of that book, so now any time one of these towns pops up, I go look. In fact, speaking of Christmas decorations, I posted about it earlier today. It was reported in Dallas, Texas. They had a report that some of the wealthier houses, they said, hey, we don't want people coming in here gawking at our Christmas decorations. Get on out of here. And so they're looking at proposing an ordinance to stop people from driving through and looking at their really garish, nativity scenes and all the rest of it. But this specifically is in Preston Hollow. Because of James Loewen, he said, oh man, Dallas, they got lots of sundown towns, so-called, all around the Dallas area. Parkland, that's one, all around the Dallas area. He said you can just go, and matter of fact, it's so ingrained in that area, some of the history of the Dallas Cowboys includes black football players there. You can't buy no house here, but I play for America's team. You can't buy no house here. Back to Pennsylvania, Beaver County. So I go look, and of course, racially restricted region. This is western Pennsylvania, like pretty close to Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh. I've not been to Beaver County. So I'm telling her this as I'm finding out, because I'd never heard of this till she mentions it. So I say, oh, wow, Dr. Leib, Beaver County is listed as a racially restricted region. They don't have no black people. That she's like, oh, yeah, I know. Of course. So I'm continuing to research while we're here and discussing white supremacy in Baltimore. I said, oh, man, Dr. Leib, did you know that they booted all the black people out of Beaver County in 1933? She said, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, although it's not shocking and blah, blah. So I continue to do my digging, research. They have a totally different banishment. I can't really say different part of the state because it's still western Pennsylvania, but it's a little bit south of Beaver County. And this one happened about a decade previously, but close enough. Pennsylvania, and I guess this is one of those places people wouldn't think about to say, well, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Apparently they have an extensive history of we are tired of the niggras. Now beat it. Many times over, not just Beaver County, and whole book about this here incident from 1923, not Beaver County, but Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And in fact, you heard a snippet at the beginning today. First, you heard a little bit from the documentary film, We'll Make the Journey, which focuses on some of the history, black people who lived in this part of western Pennsylvania, Johnstown specifically. You heard them talking about what it was like growing up there. Specifically, you heard from the first speaker, Ruth B. Whitehead, and then the second speaker, James S. Lightfoot, both black people, victims of racism, and just kind of talking about some of their experiences, recollections being there. Mr. Lightfoot spoke second. He was talking about, he said specifically that he didn't have any sort of experience or problem with racism, He said the white school and the black school, they were segregated, but he said they didn't do any name calling or anything like that. They got along. That's his report. Victims Guaranteed qualified. I found it interesting, that documentary. It's not 8 hours, I don't think, but what I watched, I didn't hear anyone mention the incident we're going to talk about today. That's interesting. Maybe I didn't pay close enough attention. And then you heard the news report, that's more recent, discussing the incident we will review today, the 1923 purge of black people and Mexicans from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, the Klan involvement in all of this. I can only remind folks, I've already stated, James Loewen, Sundown Towns, it's in the archives, massively important text, really anywhere if you have connections to any part of the so-called U.S. Also, Elliot Jaspin, Buried in the Bitter Water. He talks about these sort of events, so-called racial cleansings. He was one of the first guests that we had on the broadcast. Very important book as well. Even he talked about words and how he got pushback from other white people about labeling these as racial cleansings. He says, what else do you call them? They say, all the black people, you got 5 hours to get out. What else do you call them? And even we talked about that word cleansing. I said, yes, even with all the connotations, that's what they thought. We're getting rid of the dirt. But Elliot Jaspin, Buried in the Bitter Water, and even, in fact, he said, Mr. Jaspin told us, he said, hey, according to census data and what have you, these sorts of things where racist white people come and boot all the black people out, that this sort of thing happened at least 260 times. He didn't even have a cap like, no, couldn't be any more than 200. No, it happened at least 260 times, and he said that is very important for thinking about what we mean when we say system of white supremacy, and even when we start talking about economics. When you have over and over and over documented evidence of black people being told you got 5 hours to beat it. I don't care what you own, acres, property, you got 5 hours to beat it. That might have an impact on generational wealth, as opposed to black people being lazy and not having shoot straps. Oh man, all those purges and expulsions, that might mess up the piggy bank a little bit. Maybe. The book we're chatting about today, fascinating, especially if you got connections to Pennsylvania. Banished from Johnstown. Whew. Racist backlash in Pennsylvania. Fascinating incident of history, I think, reveals a lot about the system of white supremacy racism. Our guest, he wrote this here book, award-winning journalist, resident in the state of Pennsylvania, and a founder of the Rosedale Oral History Project. Looking forward to chatting about the great book, trying to learn as much as we can about the system of racism. Joining us live for the so-called holiday season, our guest, Mr. Cody McDevitt. Mr. McDevitt, are you with us, sir?
I am. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Tuesday evening. For folks, this might be their first time hearing about the work that you do and your book, Banished from Johnstown. Anything that you would like to share briefly about the work you do out in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I still work on this. I do other investigative work, including into the stock trading ban in Congress is now happening in large part because I went through financial disclosures and then traced it to insider trading. But I still do work on this, and for the past year, I've been working, or past 3 years actually, I've been working with the black community to stage a play or develop a play and stage it so that we can film it and put in curriculums that can't afford the book. So that's the next phase. And additionally, I found information that is highly relevant to this, that changes the complexion of the story. Many of the police officers that were involved in the shooting had ties to white supremacy and were also accepting bribes from black criminals, which changes the nature of the shootout that triggered the incident. So there's a lot of police corruption and corruption of officials that changed the nature of the triggering incident as well.
Fascinating. Get to some of that
Yeah.
as well. I guess for listeners, one, were you born in this part of Pennsylvania, or did you relocate?
I was born in Peters Township, but my mom and dad came from Johnstown, and then I ended up getting one of my early reporting jobs in Somerset County, which is nearby. It's Somerset Daily American, which has and it closed, and then they had a publication in Johnstown that I wanted to do a Black history story for February, and then I went to the local museum and asked them, is there any interesting Black history moments that happen here? And then they mentioned this, and I just thought it was completely neglected, and people encouraged me to write a book about it, so I started researching it. And as you guys probably know, in the past 10 years, there's been revolutions in the ability to write these types of stories with repositories like newspapers.com, which I don't know if you're familiar with. You can basically do keyword searches on, and you guys could probably write these types of stories. And in fact, I encourage you to do it, where you go through newspapers.com and you start looking for racial expulsions. And you guys would probably find several incidents of this happening across the country. I found it happening in Pittsburgh, too, by the way. There's actually a picture in the newspaper that I found of Black people leaving the community.
Wow.
And so this happened all over the country. And if you guys wanted to write a few articles about it happening in you could probably find a whole bunch on newspapers.com. What I think we should do to further flesh out these stories, and it wouldn't even have to be, this could be easily done if we connected these artificial intelligence engines like Perplexity or ChatGPT to the microfilm collections like newspapers.com. You could sit there and then do extensive research with artificial intelligence to unearth and reconstruct more of these incidents happening across the country, which is what I want to see happen.
Wow. I would be interested in that as well. And I think of these as all the same, the so-called sundown towns. It's all one and the same. I would be very interested in that. I guess one question, if I could go backwards, you said you were looking for a project dealing with Black history in this, I guess, specific part of Western Pennsylvania. For people who've not seen you, Mr. McDevitt, you're classified as a white man. Is that true?
Yeah, Irish American is what I am.
Okay, just for our purposes and census records with racial classifications and such, are you classified as a white man?
Yeah, you can say I'm a white man, yeah.
Okay. What specifically, what was your interest in wanting to research and write a project about Black history as a white man?
Well, I should probably give some context on newsroom composition in these newsrooms. I think at the time in Johnstown and Somerset, there was one Black reporter, Ron Fisher, and then the rest of the newsrooms were white. And I also knew that I was one of the more gifted researchers in the area and also a gifted writer. So I knew that once I unearthed the story that I had an obligation to lend my research skills and talents. And I actually spoke to a Black woman recently because I'm also in the reproductive rights movement. But she told me, I read in her book, she said, are you going to use your skills, whatever they are, to advance the rights of humanity? And so my research skills, this is a Black woman that told me this, And so I wanted to use my research skills and writing skills, whatever skills I had, which is those are my greatest ones, to advance the concerns and interests of communities, groups, and causes that I care about. And I always had an affinity for Black history in college. I would read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I never really had a perception of Black men or Black women as helpless, for that matter. I mean, I grew up admiring strong Black men like Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan, and so that the heroism of Black figures and the defiance of Black figures, especially journalists, animates the every piece of work that I've written on this story. So it's not just a story about Black victimhood, it's a story about Black strength, heroism, defiance, and persistence and perseverance. So it wasn't a story of white people, or including myself, who came to the rescue of Black people. It was Black people saving themselves. A lot of people didn't really see that because they didn't really engage the work, because I think, you know, when you're a white man writing a Black history book, there's a lot of resistance and reluctance to engage the work. But for those who did engage the work and also have worked with me on the play that I hope to stage, there's a real empowering view of Black people defying this moment of evil and persecution.
Fascinating. Okay. Wow, I'll kind of process that as we proceed. And I will say the Pittsburgh Courier and Black journalists of the time, that's a theme that we've returned to frequently on this broadcast, the importance of Black journalists. That is a major theme in the book, Banished from Johnstown. Before we get to the text specifically, this broadcast, I ask our guests the term racism and the term white supremacy I use as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
You know, if you want to do another, I've done a lot of explorations on white supremacy, and there's a lot of things that I've encountered when I moved into my reproductive rights research and stuff, including stuff that happened in Mississippi since then that are even darker than this. But if you want to do a really good podcast about white supremacy and how it manifests itself now, I would check out a book, and this is Supremacy. It's called The Turner Diaries. You ever hear that?
I'm so glad. That's one for listeners. That's why I mute my line, Mr. McDevitt, because sometimes I'll be surprised by responses that our guests give. So I was not expecting you to mention that book. Out of the many things that you could have said, I was not thinking that you were going to mention that book. Yes, I am familiar with that book, but it is very important. That's one thing in terms of getting questions answered. Man, I found that frequently white people will deliberately practice racism by not answering questions. So very important. If you can answer our questions, then we can get to the text too. Definition of racism. Do you think this definition is accurate? Does such a system exist? I'll give you the definition again. A global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Truthful, does such a system exist?
I think it's because I'm trying to give you an honest answer because I've really encountered white supremacy. I mean, I think there is an organized. I don't think it's kind of like a cabal, you know, like a hierarchical cabal. I think white supremacy in certain states like Mississippi, where I've encountered it, I think there is a hierarchical, let's race bait and manipulate people so that we can control power. I've definitely seen that in Mississippi, places in the Deep South, Alabama, where there's a lot of secrecy. Like I've tried to file, I don't know if you know anything about open records laws in Alabama, because I've tried to, I try to unearth these types of information in these types of states. And you can't file open records requests in Alabama unless you're a resident of Alabama, which is, if you know anything about open records laws, and this is the type of law stuff where you would actually be able to prove what you're trying to say about white supremacy. And I've actually tried to find tangible evidence to find these types of efforts. I think white supremacy, historically, I think you're right. Like I think in certain areas, especially with like Bull Connor and all those eras before Martin Luther King's heroism and Malcolm X's heroism, I think there was exactly what you're talking about, which is things like Henry Ford and what you saw in Nazi Germany, where there was a systematic effort. I think, and this is just me not dodging the question, this is me just drawing from my own research. I think white supremacy, there's different virulent degrees of it. There's the subtle that you see on social media, things that are done through subtle subtext, and then there's other forms that like you would see in the Aryan Nation in Idaho and those types of things where there is hierarchical, but the white supremacy is manifesting itself more as sectarianism. And
I want to hop in really quick here, sir, just because we spent a lot of time on this, and I still am, just for our non-white listeners, I'm still not sure I even got an answer to my question, just so that we can get to the book and not take all night on this. It sounded like no. So am I being accurate here? It's sounding like no. You do not think that such a system exists. You do not think that definition is accurate. Is that correct?
I think what's fair to say is I probably have a different conception based on my research of how white supremacy manifests itself. Yes, that's probably what I think I'm answering your question, but I don't know if it's satisfactory.
Can we get a yes or no? Because it sounded like you're just saying no. Like, if you could just be honest, if you say no, it's no problem, then we can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, well, can you ask me directly what the question is, and I'll give you a yes or no.
Do you think this definition, do you need the definition again? Because I'll give it, but do you think this definition is accurate?
Yeah, I'm not
such a system? Okay, well, I just want a yes, no, then we can move forward. So I'm going to give you the definition. This is yes, no. Global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Just for our non-white listeners, the word hierarchy is not in that definition. It was said by our guest. Yes or no, though, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I would say amongst white supremacists, yeah, that's the definition.
That was not the question, sir. See, that's what I'm saying. We're wasting too much time on this. You're making me suspicious. I just asked you. I didn't ask what white supremacists think. Sir, Mr. McDevitt. Yes. Such a system exists. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to argue. I was just
okay. I'm just asking a question. I'm pointing out it's very suspicious. It shouldn't take that long or be that difficult to get an answer to a simple question about a definition. But we'll proceed. With suspicion, we will proceed. Two things. One, I was watching the video where you talked about this book, and you said, unless I didn't hear it correctly, you can set me straight, please do, that there were 400 of these sorts of racial expulsions just in Pennsylvania, not the U.S., just Pennsylvania. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, James Lowen told me that. I spoke to James Lowen, and I also worked with Elliot Jaspin. So yeah, it happened roughly, according to Lowen's estimate, 400 times in the state of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Yeah.
Staggering. Okay. And then two, not Pennsylvania, but it's in the book, so I try to read carefully. And we were just talking about Indiana, and importantly, we spoke with a white woman who traveled all the way from Germany to work with James Lowen on these sundown towns, and Indiana no less.
Yeah.
And we were talking about things, all the same thing, but we were just talking about Indiana. You start this book off talking about how these expulsions happened in a number of towns, and you specifically mentioned South Bend, Indiana, where they expelled approximately 1,500 black people in South Bend, Indiana. Is that true? And can we get a little bit more detail? Because I kind of struggled to find that one.
Yeah, this is where, when I sat here and I told you and your listeners to consult newspapers.com, this is where you would find incidents like this. You're not going to find this on Google or ChatGPT until we connect those artificial intelligence services to these newspaper repositories. But yeah, there was an incident. It happened all over the country, and so the way that you would do this is you would unearth the microfilm research, the story, on newspapers, and then you would try to find primary documents and investigations in places like the Library of Congress or the Schomburg Center up in New York, or other places that would require some sort of visit, and then you take photographs, upload it to Dropbox, and then analyze the evidence, which is where I found out recently when I reconsulted the Library of Congress that there was white supremacy within the, insofar as Klan membership in Johnstown law enforcement. I found that out within the last 6 months.
Fascinating. Okay. Are there books, or right now in terms of the South Bend, Indiana incident, are there any books or other resources, or is it just right now newspapers and such?
No. I didn't, I basically, and I should probably just tell you this, I mean, I funded the research for this book, Driving Uber in Black Neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. So I couldn't really, just in my budget, be able to do what James Lowen did, because he had hundreds of thousands of dollars to investigate it. So I paid for all this research out of my own pocket. So I couldn't really travel to South Bend, and I could only afford to do the Johnstown one. Although I did find, and I can probably, if you guys want me to send you the evidence of the Stowe Township one in Pittsburgh, where there's actually a picture you could share on social media of it happening. Wow. So I visited the local library, the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, and then I reconstructed that one. And I wanted to write an editorial about it on the 100th anniversary and work to get a historical marker, and also to get essays written in local schools as I did in Johnstown, because I got the book in curricula in Johnstown, where the students now write essays on how racism affected the development of the community and how it affects perceptions of them and black people, and students have written about that for 5 years now. But I found an incident in the microfilm in Pittsburgh. But yeah, I mean, that's why I was encouraging your listeners to do some exploration themselves, and then talk about their own communities where this happened and raise awareness about it.
I support that. Absolutely. Get out there and do that research online, or go to the libraries that you have access to. So since you shared with us that you funded Banished from Johnstown, racist backlash in Pennsylvania, you funded this out of your own pocket and going out driving Ubers in black neighborhoods in Pittsburgh to put all this together. Who was your intended audience? Like, who were you thinking is going to benefit and you were hoping is going to read Banished from Johnstown? Like an academic audience, general audience? Who did you envision holding this book?
I was a very young author when I wrote this. I mean, I was in my mid-30s. I think I was just going for a general audience. It was my first serious my second serious work of scholarship. I had also done a World War II compendium, but I think I wanted to it was a local audience that I was going for. I hoped that on the 100th anniversary that it would have gained more traction, and especially with Donald Trump's presidency, and all the things that he's doing with displacing Latino people. And because Latino people were also affected by this. And so I'd hoped that it would gain national attention then, but it didn't. But it's still locally. I did presentations in white, black churches, Rotary clubs, historical and genealogical groups. And as I said, for the past, because, I mean, in some of these, as you know, in these inner city schools where this type of history should be learned, they can't afford to buy the book. And so what I wanted to do, and I did this with the help of black leaders in Johnstown that I met with over the course of 2 years, to develop a play that we could stage and film, and then they could just watch the YouTube video on Black history instead of buying the book because they couldn't afford it. And so that was that's basically at this point, since I didn't make any money off this book. I mean, it sold. I mean, I make probably about $300 every 6 months for it. So I probably, at this point, it's just something that I deeply care about insofar as raising awareness about. But I hope the audience is just young, especially young people that need to learn this history so that, unfortunately, it has, so it doesn't repeat itself.
Context of White Supremacy. Author and resident in Pennsylvania, Mr. Cody McDevitt. So the introduction to the text, you write, I knew Johnstown and Western Pennsylvania had a history of racism, but it always seemed as if it wasn't what you would see in the southern United States. The kind of intolerance was at a different level. And yet, when studying our history here, there are remarkable instances of it. I was surprised when I found out what happened in Johnstown in 1923, when 2,000 African Americans and Mexicans were forced from their homes. But it was also painfully familiar. Drive through parts of the state and you'll see Confederate flags and trucks and outside homes. On trucks outside homes. You'll hear about white supremacist militias. There's an underlying sense that this is a white working class area and all others are not quite welcome. I have not been to the good state of Pennsylvania in a while, so I have not heard about the white supremacist militias. Can you share some details on the militia groups out there?
Yeah, I mean, when I found in some of these areas, it was still the Klan, and the Klan and I did other research on the Klan. They didn't just target black people, but the militias are more what's happened in the Trump era. You know, I didn't do so much contemporary research more than era research there, but they were still recruiting on anti-immigrant and anti-black sentiment, and a lot of it, what I found was appalling appeals to the criminal, doing exactly what I said the book shouldn't do, which is, or what people shouldn't do, is criminalize black people and saying they're more likely to commit crime. And then there was anti-Semitism that was involved, I think, in some of the things that they were passing out and dropping off in people's driveways. And I also heard in some of the, there's also another story that happened in Johnstown where this Klan sniper, I think he confessed to the murder of killing a black man walking with a white woman. I found that out later. And then in one of the churches that I had done a presentation on, I think there was a Klan rally like 2 weeks before. So yeah, I mean, there is in this, at least in this part of, in the part of the state we're talking about, there is heavy organized white supremacy. Yeah.
Wow, white supremacist snipers. Wow. I did just mention Joseph Paul Franklin. Heard this before, but wow. Okay, so I'll go check the news out. But they're giving us lots of things to research.
I think I can send more about that. I forget the name. If you just chat GPT, was there a black man and woman killed in Johnstown by a Klan sniper? If you just chat GPT that, it'll give you the information that, and maybe you could do a real, because apparently the sniper, he traveled across the country and he was killing like black people. I forget his name.
Franklin. That is, I mean, I'm going to look. Yeah, I'm going to look as soon as we're done this evening, sir. But that is totally Joseph Paul Franklin. He did the exact same thing. He was going across the country.
Yeah.
He shot Vernon Jordan. He didn't kill him, but he shot him. He was specifically targeting black dudes who were with a white woman, black people in general, but the exact same thing. Anyway, thank you. I didn't hear about this in the militia groups and snipers in Pennsylvania, but I live a long way from there. Continuing, this is all an introduction to Banished from Johnstown. You write, recently, a man drove a pickup truck through a black neighborhood in Johnstown with a banner that said, "In loving memory of James Earl Ray, honoring the man who assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr." He also had a black mannequin that hung over the tailgate on one side of the truck. Those people are in the minority here, but they are still part of the Johnstown community. Had two questions here. One, I didn't see a footnote. This book it's nonfiction, historical, lots of footnotes and all that good stuff. But I didn't see a footnote here. When did this happen? Can you give us some details?
I mean, I remember seeing it on the news, like, because when we were, we competed with the Johnstown newspapers, but I remember seeing that there was a guy, it was one of those things that, like, when you hear, you're like, that's shocking that someone would do that. I mean, obviously any reasonable or humane person would have that reaction, but I remember seeing it on the news, and I think it was on WJAC, which is the local TV station. I should have had a citation. I mean, that's one of the things that I could have done better with that book, is I could have made it more accessible. But as I said, I was funding it all myself, and it was also early in my career, so I was still developing as a historian. But that did happen, and if I remember correctly, it was in loving memory of James Earl Ray was what who's obviously the assassin of Martin Luther King. And other reports, I think, indicated that it was Barack Obama. But I think the initial report that I remember was that it was in loving memory of James Earl Ray.
Fascinating. Much obliged, sir. I'll look for the details. I will say, just because of our scholarship on COINTELPRO ongoing, I would use the word the assassin, as we were told, James Earl Ray, not obviously, because that was contested even by Dr. King's family, and FBI J. Edgar Hoover does come up in the book. So on COINTELPRO, not obvious. The second question that I had on that, and the mannequin, man, that my brother down in Texas who was dragged by the car. Anyway, the second part of that question, where you write, this is the sentence right after the mannequin and James Earl Ray and all that, you write that those people are in the minority here, but they are still part of the Johnstown community. Who are you talking about when you say those people?
This is, I was trying to get into this earlier, but I think maybe there was probably a loss in I was trying to relay what I had seen, which is that there's segments of the population that are virulently racist in Johnstown, and then other white people that I found when I went to, like, superintendents and saying that we should put Black history in curriculums, they were like, yeah, this is a good idea. I mean, there are the people that fly the Confederate flags, and there are people that are that think it's almost as American as apple pie to be racist. But I also found, and I think it was most at least most people in the Johnstown area. Now, if you talk about some of the surrounding areas where there's less population in the rural areas, I think that the proportion of the population that would be organized white supremacy is greater. But I think there are people that are like gangs and like connect and relate and bond over it. I guess that was what I was trying to get at earlier in when I say that there's a subset of the population, that's what there's sects of the population that are, I think, more extreme in their views.
I see. That last word that Mr. McDevitt shared with us, more, or I guess last two words, more extreme. That is important. I would just, one of the concepts very important that we've used over the years here, racial narrowing, meaning where sometimes one of the ways that white people deliberately practice racism, they will present the racists are just this tiny group of white people here, like the Klan or President Trump or Nazis, that these small little white people here, where this problem to last this long and for there to be 400 racial cleansings just in Pennsylvania, in addition to all of the rest of this problem being all over the world, it cannot just be a tiny subset of white people causing all of this. It has to be, and white people aren't even that much of the population on the planet, Dr. Welsing would remind us. And the other component from Dr. Cambon, I do not disaggregate white people. Just when I read something like that those people are in the minority here, it would make me think that there's a location where the racists don't have too much power, like they're greatly outnumbered and they don't have any say-so. And man, I don't know anywhere where that is the case, where the racists are outnumbered and don't have any power. Do you know anywhere in Pennsylvania specifically where that's the case?
Well, I mean, there are certain areas where I think black people have greater power and freedom. Now, there's still a lot of oppression, for instance, in Pittsburgh.
Now, this is one of those, Mr. McDevitt, this is what I mean, where I say white people deliberately don't answer the question.
You're looking for yes or no answers, and I'm trying to give context on what my research is.
But I'm saying you deliberately switched the question around, because I didn't ask you about the power that black people had. I asked you about the power that racists have, and that is the most important thing. Now, I said again,
okay.
Do you know any areas where racists are outnumbered and they don't have any power, any say-so in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly places where white supremacists are outnumbered, but they have power. They don't have the lion's share of power.
They don't have the lion's share of power. Metaphor.
Yeah.
Where are these places where they don't have the lion's share of power? I don't really know what that means. What does that mean? Let's start there. What do you mean?
Can I ask you a question? Do you think most white people are white supremacists?
No. This is another, for listeners, this is by many white people considered rude to answer a question with a question. No, sir, you may not, because I had a question that I'd already asked. Now let's get back to, what do you mean when you say the lion's share of power, and that the racists, there are some places they don't have the lion's share of power? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, I don't think that in Pittsburgh most people are white supremacists, and there are places in the country where
I didn't ask about a
trying
proportion. I'm not either. I'm just trying to make sure that I get my specific question asked, because I didn't ask you if most people.
The way that you're phrasing it,
let's slow down.
You're saying,
well, let's hang on and slow down, because I'm saying that there's a pattern, not just with you, but with white people in general, where they don't ask the questions that non-white people ask. This is widespread. So let's slow down and let's make sure that you answer the question that was asked. So I didn't ask about places where black people have a little bit more power. I didn't ask about the percentage of racists in Pittsburgh. I said, let's just start with this. Let's forget even the number part, because I've just said, hey, white people can be outnumbered and they're still in charge. So are there any places in Pittsburgh where the racists, they're not in charge? Pennsylvania, not Pittsburgh.
There was just a black mayor. Well, you just asked Pittsburgh. In America?
In Pennsylvania. We'll stick to the
I'm
location we're talking about.
Let me just, it seems like these questions are they're trying to corner me. You said the power, and which means that they have the prevailing influence in a community. The power, that's the connotation. But can we just talk about my work? I'm not looking to be arguing about.
Well, we were. I just want to walk back to how we got here. And again, for listeners, This is a pattern with people classified as white, not answering questions. But this is directly from your work, because you said those people are in the minority here, but they are still part of the Johnstown community. And what I'm saying, this makes it to me sound like the racists, they're not really like, this is one of the places where allegedly the racists don't have the lion's share of power. I don't see no citation here. I'm saying you would have to give me evidence. I do not think that this is factual or true. I suspect that you probably have just another location where racists dominate, and this is one form where they do things like this with the mannequin and James Earl Ray and all that. But no, I do not think they are the so-called minority there. White people are in charge there. Yes?
Yeah, I think this is just where we're going to have a disagreement. I don't think that most white people in Johnstown are white supremacists. I think there's a history of white supremacy there, and there's a strong subset of the population that is virulently white supremacist. Even if you talk to Alan Cashaw, who was the NAACP head, or Marlene, or any of the people that I worked with, I think they would probably sit here and tell you that there are a lot of, maybe even most white people there. Although you could probably argue from your viewpoint with the support for Donald Trump that your viewpoint would have, in fairness, and I'm trying to seriously consider and weigh what you're saying with the election of Donald Trump. I would say, in the strong support that he had, that perhaps your view would have a lot of merit. But we're going to see what happens in the next few elections. But you're absolutely right in recent history. And a lot of this, when I wrote that, it was 2020, and I didn't really, when I wrote it, I was encouraging people, or discouraging people from supporting candidates like Joseph Calfield, and then they ended up supporting Donald Trump, who's exactly like him. So, a lot of this is history relived and also developing. So our understanding of this incident and also that community is also evolving.
Dedication to white supremacy racism, that is in my definition. One other pattern that I will point out that I've observed frequently from individuals classified as white, they will cite non-white people as references for viewpoints or opinions about racism, white supremacy, and 10 times out of 9, and that's the way that I meant to say it, it will be an inaccurate position or viewpoint. Frequently they'll pick deceased non-white people. Like, that is extremely popular. I'm so glad I started. I'm sure you've seen that documentary film, We'll Make the Journey, about the Black experience in Johnstown, and I watched it. I might have not seen the full film, or it might have been edited or what have you. They got all kinds of crazy technology, but I watched what I thought was the whole project, and I didn't hear any of those black people mention the incident that you wrote about in this book, the banishment. Did you hear? Did I just miss it? Did they talk about it and I just wasn't paying attention?
Most of the people that, and this is something that, if you could help me find a Levi Samuels, most of the people that were affected by the incident left the community, which is what the Rosedale Oral History Project was about. And I was trying to fund this as an Uber driver, was to track the movement of black people to other communities. The people that stayed, there was still some recollection in microfilm collections that I found in the 1980s, but a lot of people just didn't want to talk about it. Now you can sit there and say,
I'm sorry, just for my because I'm ignorant. When you say a lot of people didn't want to talk about it, do you mean a lot of white people didn't want to talk about it? Black people, everybody?
I think it was both.
Okay.
But a lot of and especially, there is an effort, I think, to protect black stories and have black people tell those stories, and I understand and appreciate that. But I think even among black people that I interacted with at first, they're like, they didn't realize it had happened because, and that shows the danger of not talking about incidents like this, is that they get neglected and forgotten and thrown, as Tony Norman said, on the ash heap of history because they're forgotten. Whereas if you reconstruct them, and the only reason I was able to reconstruct them was because of that, the newspapers were digitized and I was able to unearth and find information. And then it's an imperfect book, as you pointed out, like the citations could have been better and everything, but it wasn't intended to be, it was intended to just be a start for the research. What I wanted to culminate it with was the continued oral history project, and then I wanted to have a museum that in Johnstown that told the entire history of sundown towns and racial cleansing in America. That was what I wanted it to culminate with, but it's very hard to move and to get any support from it. Even though I've continued to work on it, I just there's a lot of people that think it's.
You said it's hard to get support?
It's hard for me to find. It's hard to get. Like I tried to raise money for it, and there's not really, I think. And this maybe backs up your point that to get the museum going, I haven't really seen much collaborative effort to support me in doing that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They will DEI you right on out of West Pennsylvania, man. They will drop the steel curtain on you, Mr. McDevitt, talking about all that in this time period. But actually, well, that was important. That was important. However, I do want to go backwards. Just Mr. McDevitt told us that many people in West Pennsylvania did not want to talk about this. I've heard that before. But he said specifically, it seems like some of the damage of not talking about this for so long and, quieted down all that. James Lowen talked about that's a pattern with these incidents too. But he said it seems like part of the result of that is that the black people that he talked to, many of them, they didn't know about this incident. That also is something that I've heard before. And he talked about the black people that were, many of them that were there, they left. And so, but either way, a lot of them, they didn't know about this. Painfully, that is something that I've heard many, many, many times with these incidents where black people are totally clueless. Because I said I watched the documentary where the black people from Johnstown were talking about, even had a black person who said, I've had no experience with racism here. Much to your point, sir, yes, I'm sure it's very easy to find black people who will say, I don't have no problem with white people. I don't have no problem with, especially if they're talking in public. Woo-wee. Yes, it's very easy to find black people, non-white people in general, who will say, no way, man. No racists here in Pennsylvania. No racists in the U.S., in fact, and I don't have no trouble with racism. Is that microphone off? Okay, let's get on here. Like, that is really, really common, even with black people who live in places that are racially restricted regions where there's documented history. They booted the black people out. They still don't think racism is a problem. Wow.
Yeah. I'm just like, I try to base my, I talk to, people in both communities. And so I think, a lot of the sensibilities that I'm relaying are what I'm hearing from other people, so that my perceptions are based on and granted, you're right that sometimes people are wrong in different communities, and sometimes they say things. But I was just basing things on what I was hearing here.
I'm sure. I'm not doubting you at all, Mr. McDevitt, at all. And that's the result of these sort of incidents. It's the exact. James Lowen talked about that. Mr. Jaspin talked about that when he was with us directly. This is exactly what is supposed to happen. And a lot of times there's black people directly or indirectly are told, shh, you had better not say anything about all this. So, don't talk about it. Don't bring Mr. Fuller, Neely Fuller Jr., he was Tulsa. You talk about that one. He grew up a few miles from Tulsa, and he said the exact same thing. He said he was born in 1929, so a few years after it happened, but he said no one ever said a word about what happened in Tulsa. He didn't know anything about it. He said sometimes people would murmur about it, and he would get confused. Like, what? There was a talk. I'm in Washington State. We had an author come here. He wrote a book about the Tulsa purge and riot, all that racist purge. He came here to Washington State. There was a black male in attendance. He was about, I'm going to say, I'm bad with guessing ages. Many people are. But I'm going to say he was like in his 70s. He might have been a little, I'm sorry, sir, if you're younger than that, but I thought he was in his 70s. And he said, I was born in Tulsa, and I had never heard. He said, I've lived, I think he said he was beyond 50, and he didn't know, and had left Oklahoma. He was like thousands of miles from home, and someone brought all this up to him, and he said he was clueless. So that is the result of terrorism. Victims of racism, frequently we are not very informed, and that's how it's supposed to be. Directly to the book, you said Banished from Johnstown, specifically the chapter Shock and the Search for a Cause. You kind of give context for what happened with all of this. You write, whites thought mill owners pulled down white labor with their support and importation of black labor. So the white workers made African Americans feel unwelcome. Even if blacks wanted to join local labor unions, the organization's leaders often excluded or treated them in a hostile manner, and employers frowned upon union participation, which also made black people less eager to join. They were surprised by the way they were treated, said Dr. Ralph Proctor, who teaches ethnic and diversity studies at the Community College of Allegheny County. They had been told that if you got north, racism wouldn't exist, man. Woof, you believe that when I got a bridge, I can tell you. But they found out it existed strongly. It was a little more subtle than the South sometimes, but it was just as bad. The South had Jim Crow laws, and the North had Jim Crow customs that operated the same way. That's the same thing. The Johnstown Democratic editorialized about the issue in a racist way in a December 1919 column called Mixing the Labor Problem. The practical question arises as to whether a Southern darky is not really an alien when he is brought north and plumped down in the midst of one of our northern industrial communities. Alien is as alien does and thinks. The Southern darky's point of view, his manner of living, his customs and practices are most assuredly not those of the North. Negro labor from the South, many think, does not make a desirable addition to community life, since we have the problems of the alien pressing so strongly, at least as far as a great many of our well-meaning patriots are concerned. Would it not be just as well to refrain from complicating them by adding the Southern darky to the Northern melting pot? And just because he said this is blacks and Mexicans out, I got to read the passage about the Mexicans, so it continues. In addition to the Southern darky, who is an alien with respect, got beaten up on the black thing, still thought we wanted to well, with respect to the North, there is indeed the menace of the Mexican. This menace is not confined to the land south of the Rio Grande. It is much nearer home than that. There are a number of industrial concerns in this country that, at the present time, are angling for Mexican workers. If the Mexican is a bad man, if he is a troublemaker, if he is untrustworthy and treacherous, why snatch him from his native environment and make a neighbor of him? It is not enough to answer that the Mexican is cheap labor, for cheap labor has ceased to be a consideration in this country. Make America great again. I added that last part on because it could be, add Somalian jab in there and get these Haitians out of it. Hey, we could be talking right now, but this is from way back when. This is the context of what happened in 1923, Mr. McDevitt?
Yeah, and that was me trying to sit here and show how criminalizing black people and Latino people, and I agree with you completely that Donald Trump is, it's so eerily similar with what he's doing with what that mayor and what happened in that city, which is that when you criminalize and cast suspicion on these communities of color, terrible things and terrible injustices can happen, like what happened in Johnstown, but also what's happening to these Latino people across the country that are just being rounded up and, to be honest with you, bullied by what I perceive to be thugs. And a lot of it has to do with America generally criminalizing these people in newspapers, as you saw with that editorial. But now it's not so much the newspapers that people are reading, but these right-wing newsletters and right-wing podcasts, and not even right-wing sometimes. Sometimes it's just mainstream. As you guys know, are you guys based in Los Angeles? Is that where?
Washington State's Washington State's are.
Yeah, so like on the West Coast, even in major cities like Seattle or elsewhere, you'll see on the newscast where they'll emphasize the race of the person in criminal reporting. And that was one of the major conclusions that I had in the book, is that habit and that custom is something that has to stop if we're going to prevent things like that from repeating, which unfortunately no one really. And I did grew a little cynical afterward that none of the lessons that I tried to teach people about. I mean, among the youth that were writing essays on racism, they learned, but among adults, as I just told you, that there was a lot of indifference to the findings, and then history did repeat itself in large part with Donald Trump, which left me very jaded towards the end of it. Because it's like you spend like 10 years working on something like, yeah, we should never do this again, and then he gets elected, and you're like, okay. It's kind of like you feel like
elected 2 times.
Yeah, and well, I mean, if you read the finish of the book, like this guy lost the first election, and then 4 years later came back and won again 4 years later. And so, like, I was watching what was happening, like, on the national stage. As I'm like, has anybody read the book? Like, does anybody care at all about this part of history if it's literally happening again? And once Donald Trump got elected again, I would after all the work that I tried to raise awareness, I did. There was a period, and still is a period, where I got very cynical. Like, do people even care that these things happened, or do they even care to learn about them? But my hope is that these students that read this book in the Johnstown School District, maybe it made a small difference with, some black and white students where they're like, yeah, we should never do that again. And maybe 20 or 30 years down the road, maybe there's even just a small group of people that resist it. That's really all I can hope with this work.
Context of White Supremacy. Dedication is in the definition for a reason. And that's the sort of thing that I look at, where I see patterns of behavior where individuals classified as white do the exact same thing when they're talking about individuals that they say are not white, whether it's labor, immigration, they're going to mess up our country, whatever excuses that they give. This is dedication to white supremacy, racism, and even the response to your book, it's not ignorance, it's, hey, this is what we want. That's why we keep doing the same thing over and over again. Like, get out of here. What are you even doing with all this? Let's see. This also reminded me of our current environment, but you mentioned the election. In fact, it even reminded me some of those hooligans, white terrorism on January 6th, some of them came from rural parts of Pennsylvania. We talked about that over, and they had white women, white men who started. I said, man, why did you get all the way from Pennsylvania? And one of them, she brought the ice axe. The white woman, Miss Powell, she had an ice axe. It was down there. Heave. Oh, we got to break in from Pennsylvania, from some of these from racially restricted regions in Pennsylvania. I said that right there lets me know a lot about the politics of what's going on January 6th, where these folks came from. But that notwithstanding, what are, Mr. McDevitt, what are, in the context of your book, what are floaters?
Floaters. I'm trying to it's been like 5 years. I think they were, if I remember correctly, I think the term floater were people that were brought to vote for a specific party. And so there was a lot of suspicion, I think. If I remember correctly, it's been about 10 years since I published it in 2020, but and I worked on something else. But I think floaters was the term for Black people that were brought in to vote for a specific party. And so there was a lot of they're just trying to rig elections. I think that was, like I said, I could be wrong about that, but that's what I think it was.
Bravo. Good memory, Mr. McDevitt. Absolutely. It reminds, I was going to read from, this is early in the book as well, Shock and Search for a Cause, but you nailed it exactly. This is a part of that context and the suspicion around these outsider Negroes. Great Migration, we did read Isabel Wilkerson, Warmth of Other Suns, but that suspicion, they're coming in here, they're going to be strike breakers, or they're going to mess with our women, or they're going to drink alcohol and run amok, or they'll come in here and do some electoral fraud. Even that, to be in a system of white supremacy racism. We're not even that far removed from plantation, cotton picking slavery, and to have charge, the niggras are going to steal the election. What? And then to fast forward 100 years, and it's the exact same Obama charge. The niggras are going to steal the election. What? That's what I mean. White people just exhibit so many of the exact same behaviors. What else can I conclude? But A+ floaters.
Yeah, and that.
Go ahead.
And that was that was again why you see history repeat itself. Where what happened in Georgia, where they tried to disenfranchise voters, saying that they were guilty of fraud, and again history repeats itself because people don't really study it, or even when people try to raise awareness about it, they ignore it. It's frustrating that we didn't learn any of the lessons, including the importance of respecting the Black vote and its and who it wants to support and often empowers.
Gerrymandering aplenty, all the rest of it. I will submit humbly, and this is, you appreciate the importance of words, in saying that we didn't learn our lesson humbly. That's why I keep saying dedication. That is not the problem. That is not why these things keep continuing to happen. That's not why we still have a system of white supremacy racism, because white people didn't learn their lesson. White people are very informed about racism. I just keep saying, this is what they want. They are dead. The evidence would point to that. When you show them, hey, we should stop doing this, as you just said, respect Black people's vote. Been saying this for 150 years. They've been saying it way before Dr. King was even born. Black people were saying that. Dr. King's been dead almost 100 years now. We're still saying that. At some point, it's got to be, wait a minute. They know they should respect the vote. They got laws about that and all that, but they just don't respect Black people. They want to practice racism. What other conclusion can you come to that makes logical sense, that's based on evidence?
Yeah. And as I said, with what happened in recent years, my views started probably aligning more with the way that you're looking at things too. You do come to the conclusion that are they? I mean, you do kind of sit there and then start thinking that way.
Just trying to follow the evidence, man. I read your book. I'm just trying to follow evidence. You said this is, I'm moving ahead a little bit. I guess not that far ahead. Shock and the Search for a Cause. You write, the city was a mixture of Republicans and Democrats. Elections went both ways in Johnstown, but the Republican Party dominated Johnstown for most of the 1920s. I guess I'll pause just to say, unless I've been misinformed, it would be important for this period of time. The Republicans would be, if you think there are white people that are not racist who are supposed to be friendly to black people, no slavery, Abraham Lincoln, that would be the Republicans at this time. The Democrats would be racist, Klan, lynch the black people, get them out of here. That would be the Democrats. It didn't flip-flop for a while. So I guess if that's context, if it means anything for folks listening in at this time, or no. Continuing. The party included people of all religions and races, though it had people who supported legalizing alcohol. It was by and large the party for the dry forces. Thus, it received overwhelming support from religious organizations that supported the temperance movement. In Johnstown from 1918 to 1923, there were mixed opinions regarding booze. Some thought it was a shame that people couldn't get a drink legally, while others said the lawlessness that people undertook to get it was the bigger issue and the one that needed to be addressed. Prohibition, enforcement, and violations were central to most of the problems that city leaders faced. In the 1910s, there was an effort to Americanize immigrants who came to Johnstown. Much like elsewhere, they insisted everyone speak the same language and observe the same customs. One of the effects was that it brought immigrants together regardless of nationality. They knew they faced the same challenge. There was a lot of ethnic bashing among people there was a lot of ethnic bashing among people who were part of what was known as Old Johnstown, which was composed of people whose ancestors went back to its earliest days. I'll pause there because you do talk about the influx of immigrants from lots of places around the world at this point. Was there an effort to so-called Americanize the black migrants from the South?
Yeah, I mean, there's often, from what I found, that they wanted them to conform to, the culture that prevailed, and there was an effort to do the same thing. I don't think I went. I don't think I went into a lot of the history in Johnstown focused on the immigrants from Europe to Americanize them, but I think there's a the white way is the way that people should conduct themselves, the values, the mores, the norms, and often ignoring the value and uniqueness and color and texture and worth of black culture. I think that also happened to them at that time.
Fascinating. This is Bad Elements and Bad Reactions, where we get a little bit closer to the 1923 Purge. You talk about the rise of the Klan at this time period, one of our favorite books, not the Turner Diaries, but Birth of a Nation film based on Mr. Wilson's book that we've talked about many times over the years, and the influence that it had and technological advancements in film for that time period and why it still has such resonance today more than 100 years later. But you write, to assist recruiters of the Klan, the state and national offices of the Klan attended several speakers who pledged themselves to fill engagements. Many were ministers who found the payment a welcome addition to their salaries. Those men were generally the most successful. They emphasized fervent anthems to glorify the Constitution and pure Americanism, given the response he just said. They described white Protestants as the underdog and oppressed sufferers. I'm just skipping one paragraph. The Klan targeted Presbyterian ministers for membership. The Klan leaders felt they would have an easier time recruiting members in churches if the higher-ups got in with that group. The ministers' presence aroused less controversy and opposition from the other recruiters and from the public in general. They didn't have to hide their support for the organization. The Klan sent letters to local officials saying they had organized to combat bootleggers and prohibition violators. Some in the towns in the region thought the organization would help clear some of the vice. Vice often means, oh, we just had a whole book. I talked about Baltimore where she went over planning. She said vice is a synonym for nigra. Vice, niggras, vice, niggras, vice, niggras. That's in the book specifically. But anyway, I thought this was so important. We talk about the religion of white supremacy all the time, and the Klan going and specifically targeting white ministers to come and help them recruit members and add, I guess, a layer of what should I, respectability? Would that be reasonable, accurate?
Yeah, they were seen as, and this is something that when I was developing the play, we were talking about how during that time, that they were seen as like the leaders of the community. And as I found out recently, and I can send you the documents, the primary documents, if you're interested in reading it, where the police at the time also had a lot of Klan. I didn't know that because I've continued to research and I found more information, but the law enforcement had Klan members, the politicians had Klan members among the ranks, and at the time it was the clubs and the Klan was seen as like a respectable civic organization that the best, or not best, but the most powerful members of society joined, which is shocking to me today. But it's that era that is pretty much how they viewed Klan membership.
That what you just said, to me, that is not shocking about some of the most prominent members. You have one of the pictures of the cross burnings in 1922 in Johnstown. In the caption, it says the Klan allegedly had some of the community's most prominent and influential men in its membership. That's another one. I've heard that repeatedly, and that's another where I think it's important because frequently it will be suggested that the racists are just a tiny number of white people, said that before, racial narrowing, and then within this tiny subset, these white people, they're just ignorant. They don't know any better. They're illiterate. They got one tooth. They dropped out of school, that sort of thing. And same thing I said, that is folly. You cannot have a global system of white supremacy, racism, and think that it's just a few high school dropout white people that are causing all of this. That does not make, what makes more sense, what that caption said, what you just said, the prominent, the mayor, the police officers, the clergy. Okay, now I get, that sounds like what I said before. Where would I go in the state of Pennsylvania or the world where racists don't dominate? Where would I go? The police? No. The church? No. Where would I go?
Yeah. And that was the way that things. Yeah, I mean, there's white supremacy throughout the power structure in America. Yeah, I agree.
And even, I forgot, we were doing patterns from today. Man, some of Trump's best allies, evangelical Christians, like, woo, they even, your state, they've been talking about white evangelicals in northern areas. Didn't Trump win Pennsylvania? Am I mistaken? Did he win Pennsylvania?
Yes,
second time. Okay,
yes,
that's
yes,
white evangelicals, man. That's saying that it does not change. Why? That is dedication to the system in all areas of people activity. I was even so glad I read that because I said, that's right. The Klan is a religious organization. You got it in the book. We heard it from the audio. They burned crosses. Religion of white supremacy. And then we add some respect. We getting rid of vice. Nigger. Have you, in your research, have you seen that before where vice is equated to black people?
Yeah. Where crime is, when people say there's a lot of crime in the city, the belief is that, yeah, there's a lot of black people committing crime. And I saw that in the research, and it's still present today. So, yeah, there's a lot of vice, crime, evil, and then the only people that they're thinking that are doing it are people of color, whether they're Latino or black people. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Wow. For the purge that takes place in 1923, all of this starts with the police. And that's where I said, where would we go to get away from the racism? And he told us this isn't even in the book, the extra research, because he's still learning. Bravo to Mr. McDevitt. But he said he got new information that some of these officers on the Johnstown police force at the time, they were affiliated with the Klan or whatever, racist organization. And he said the corruption, because he said that they're taking bribe now. Particularly, you take what I just said. You have all these people talking about, hey, we got this bootlegging and we got these no-count niggras that came here from the South. They're razor-toting and they get all this bootleg and bootleg whiskey and all the rest of it. And they're chasing white women and cutting a fool and then find out the people that are supposed to be maintaining law and order, they're taking bribes from the black people, the black criminals, I guess, allegedly, to, we'll look the other way, do whatever. We'll give you 2 or 3 days to do it. Like, come on. Like, this is the context for all of this taking place. But you write in the book that the episode, September 1923, there's a black male, no good Nick, from Texas, allegedly, Mr. Young, who I guess gets into it with these officers. I thought, importantly, these officers initially report white that, they've been ambushed. They think, some gang of hooligan black people, I guess, was hiding out and, we're going to get you. And we got black snipers. We got black snipers waiting to hide out and get them. And then come to find out, no, it's just this one black dude. I just find it fascinating for so many reasons, because it seemed like it was told that way repeatedly for a while, that there was some sort of racist ambush to get these officers, when that was not the case. And then also you talk about how it was repeatedly reported as some sort of race riot, when that also was not the case. It was one black dude getting into a violent confrontation with these white officers. He ended up killing, I forgot, was it 3? Did he kill 3 of them?
4.
4, okay.
Is how many that were eventually killed. But, and a lot of the reporting of that shooting, and again, this is where continued research matters. A lot of the reporting and the portrayal of the police officers and also the suspect were based on newspaper accounts of the time, which is the only thing I had to go on. So that chapter there is where, if I had the evidence that I now have, I would write it differently, because I would portray, I think one of the officers that was shot, it established that he had a relationship with Robert Young.
Wow.
And I think that was the officer that, and this is, again, it was the start. It wasn't the final. So that book wasn't the end of the research. But apparently, I think he had a relationship with Young, so maybe he was taking bribes. And other things that I found, which is that some of the officers, I think one of the officers was a member of the Klan. And so the way that I would have, now, knowing what I know now, 6 years after the publication in that book, I would have written it a lot differently now, but I didn't have the information I have now back then.
Wow. So I guess with the information that you have now, do you have maybe a different theory or a different speculation about what might have transpired with these events?
I think what happened now is that he was, and again, this is me, the man that he was driving with was Levi Samuels, who is the central figure in all this, and this is why I said if we could ever find his descendants, which is kind of hard for me to do as a one-man operation here, is driving Uber, but he drove Robert Young, the man who got in the shootout, and he was also the man who said, I think we should just pack up and leave. So I know the actual leader, who was a jitney driver, who was friends with Robert Young. And so, I think they were probably running numbers or something. And then the officer may have been taking money off the top from them to protect them. And then he didn't have enough money to keep his wife happy, which is the reason that he was angry and about to go shoot. So there are a lot of conclusions, and I depict this in the play because I found the information and I developed it, because the story, I think, is different now, where the guy that was portrayed as this evil villain may have just been a victim of a corrupt system. And then, the rest of it happened, which was victimhood, but also a lot of heroism from black journalists and James Weldon Johnson and other types of figures. So, yeah, the research that I found in the last year or two has changed my conclusions.
Wow. Context of White Supremacy. I just said that this Robert Young, he's a bad dude. They did worthless Negro, because I've seen that in other contexts where a black person gets lynched or what have you, and they'll put in the newspaper like that. We can all agree, he's worthless Negro,
Yeah.
blah, 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 that sort of thing. And it's the same, really the same pattern, same type of verbiage with Robert Young that, oh, now we all know this is some razor-toting, bootlegging Negro from the South and messing it up for us good black
Yeah.
people, or just messing it up for us in the North in general type of a thing. And then to hear, and in fact, this is the same pattern James Lowen talks about in sundown towns, where he says frequently, one, so white people restrict where black people can live at, and then he said that they would restrict like the vice, if it's going to be drugs or prostitution, if it's going to be allowed, they put that over where the black people live, and if they want to go visit and partake whenever, we can go do that. And then if not, or situation that you're talking about where, hey, maybe we charge you to look the other way and allow this to go on for a certain period of time, and then maybe we have a kerfuffle about it, and somebody gets killed, we go on, no big deal. But James Lowen did write about this in Vice Niggras. Vice Niggras. Heard that a few times.
Yeah.
And even what I just said, some of the black people would have signed off on this and said, you know what, that Robert Young is a no-count black dude, and he is not like the rest of us. We don't have anything to do with him. I thought that was amazing, like you were able to find some of these letters to include, just so listeners have a flair. I want to read one of them. And I even view some of this as, this is the result of terrorism. They were lynching black people on a regular basis back then, and no anti-lynching protection, no police to call. Sometimes you get lynched with the police and or by the police. So this is the environment. But we get from Mr. McDevitt, the respectable and law-abiding colored residents of Rosedale wish to publicly express their profound regret for the recent deplorable outbreaks of lawlessness which have deeply disgraced this section of the city. The statement read, "We wish especially to express sincere condolences to the families, relatives, and friends of the brave officers who were murdered, and to those who were injured at their post of duty. They feared guilt by association." Fear. He continues, "We want it publicly known that the respectable colored people here take no part whatever with murderers and other criminals of our race. We rightly regard them as a disgrace to us and as a danger to any community." The letter continued, "We trust that these assassins will be speed," and they're even saying plural, we, like that was an ambush. "We trust that these assassins will be speedily brought to justice, given their just sentence and the maximum penalty the law allows." Great find from Mr. McDevitt, and I think that is short sentence. It's just 5 words from Mr. McDevitt. They feared guilt by association, and rightly so. But I thought it was so important. Even can you theorize, like, what for this time period, 1923, what would be a respectable colored person?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you that does that even exist among white people in that time? And I think the answer for respectable for them meant obedient, which is racist itself. So I don't really think they meant respectable. I think they meant supplicant and obedient, which is really terrible way of looking at another human being. But yeah, that's what I think they meant by respectable.
Where were you able to locate some of these texts from that time period, letters that they wrote?
I went to the Library of Congress, and a lot of the documents were in the Gifford Pinchot papers. The stuff that I found about the corruption of law enforcement, which I found, I think, this year, and so this is really recent, is I found it in the NAACP folder at the Library of Congress, which showed the official investigation of the NAACP, and then also letters that were sent to the NAACP about the Johnstown affair, and then it had newspaper clippings. This book, as I said, and I've acknowledged its imperfection, it overly relied on microfilm. But what I wanted to do was to get a start where we could initiate a conversation about the incident. So I compiled virtually everything that I knew about it into a book. If I was going to update the book, I would rewrite that chapter about Robert Young because I found new information. But all of these letters that I found, Library of Congress, and then newspaper accounts, both in the local newspaper and then on newspapers.com. And then through all of that, I constructed what is the text as you see it.
Wow. Do some research. I say that all the time. Go to the library if you live close to D.C., or if you have a excuse to go to D.C., see if you can maybe take a day to Library of Congress. Take advantage of the libraries that you have at your fingertips. He keeps saying newspapers.com. I go hang out there, do some digging. You never know what you will find, especially with these racial expulsions, because there have been so many of them. Like, see what's in, your state.
There's another place that, and this one is where, money becomes a handicap. I want to go to Mexico City because there's a repository of Spanish-speaking letters from residents in America back to the embassy. And as you saw in the book, this is where the Latino angle could be fleshed out further. I want to travel to Mexico City where I can look into the letters and then use ChatGPT to translate them to see what Spanish people were saying about Johnstown at the time. But that's a foreign trip, so that's something that would cost thousands of dollars to go do. And as an Uber driver, I can't take that trip right now. But that is something that is a future avenue of exploration to further flesh out the story.
Wow, that would be interesting. I had flipped right to that portion of it because it was not just black people. Mayor Cauffiel, I think I'm saying it correctly, Cauffiel, the white mayor of Johnstown. So when the shooting happens, that initially is, they say this is an ambush of these officers, and oh wait a minute, it's just this one dude, which maybe this is, you didn't give us enough money. Like what? Anyway. So all this happens. It's this one black dude, but this is important because this gets attributed to all black people. This is not just Robert Young is one bad Southern nigger, and he was killed during all this. I mean, it's not even like we got to go through a trial and he might get away with this and blah, blah, blah. He's dead, so we can move forward. And no, all of you, guilt by association, as he said, all of you. Get out of here. I guess the caveat for the black people is if you've been here for 7 years, you can stay. But I mean, like you have to kind of get signed off on that, and you got to go. He has all these draconian policies. You got to go register, and you can't have no public gatherings. And can we have a dance? No, you can't have no dances. Stay in the house. We're not dealing with like this is amazing response to this from one transgression from one black person, and it extends to the Mexicans, non-white people. You write about, and I thought this is important because you write, Cauffiel, so this is a white mayor, Cauffiel told people at great length the feeling he claimed against, I'll start over. Cauffiel told people at great length the feeling he claimed existed against Bethlehem, that's the steel company, brings in the laborers, for bringing in Mexicans and black people. He directed most of his racism towards blacks as he thought Mexicans were an afterthought. But he didn't distinguish. Cauffiel didn't understand black people and Mexicans living in Rosedale. He had never been there. I'm skipping over to the next page. You write, African Americans were not the only ones brought before court. During the same period, 6 Mexicans were arrested and were ordered out. The Mexicans did not seem to have angered the people of Johnstown as much as the black community had, but Caulfield was cruel with both groups. At least to me, it seemed like there were some very important distinctions between the treatment of the Mexicans and the black people, that even some of the contemporary black people in the NAACP and some of the journalists at this time pointed out the fact that their representatives from Mexico specifically, as you said, you wanted to go to Mexico City to see what were they writing back home and blah, blah, blah. So Mexico starts to respond to this. They get involved. And as you write in the book, lots of newspapers are talking about this. But there seems to be a sentiment that there was more concern that you might upset officials in Mexico as opposed to, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing this to black people. And you even include that a lot of the so-called Mexicans, they didn't even leave. They just stayed and continued with their work, unless I misread.
Yeah, a lot of, again, that was newspaper accounts. So this is where going to Mexico City would, if I found documents pertaining to Johnstown and then translated them, you might get a different picture of how Mexicans were treated. What I found also, in addition to that, is that there was a report, and this is another avenue of research, that the Mexican embassy gave to the State Department. So the president was also involved in this, which is a new part of research, and goes back to your point, was there a cover-up even higher than, not a cover-up, but kind of just saying it's not a big deal, dismissing the importance of it at the presidential level. We found it at the gubernatorial level, but was it at the presidential level? And that's where I want to sit there and say, can I go through, I think it was Calvin Coolidge was the president then, go to his presidential library, go through the State Department files, and then that's where you go to the National Archives, and then you say, can we find, this is where you try to go mining for documents, primary documents, that would then tell us more about the story. So you'd find the State Department report about the Johnstown affair. And I did request a search through the Calvin Coolidge papers to see if we found, if there was anything. There wasn't, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a State Department telegram or report about it that I couldn't find either. And again, there's plenty of avenues for research for this story, as well as plenty of other similar incidents. It's just, America has to have an interest in this history, and that's why I think a museum to the sundown towns and racial cleansings, and I wanted to put it in Johnstown, which was the center of one of the most famous instances, so that we could continue to do the research as an organization and as an institution.
Before I get back to the Mexicans, I just want to point out here, so Bethlehem Steel, one of the biggest employers in the region at that time, they had been participating in bringing these cheap black laborers and Mexicans from the South to come up here and do cheap labor, not in the union, but cheap labor that was needed for Bethlehem Steel when this purge, racial cleanse, happens in 1923, and they're losing swaths, hundreds of workers. They don't intervene on behalf of black people, do they?
No.
Now back to the Mexicans. And matter of fact, before I get, did anybody intervene in Pennsylvania, classified as white, intervene on behalf of black people?
There were a lot of religious organizations that were white people that wrote letters to Gifford Pinchot asking him to do things, and they also sent letters to other powerful people in Caulfield too. But those people's power was limited towards, I'm going to send a statement to the newspaper and just say this is wrong. They didn't really have the ability to Gifford Pinchot did, and that's where he's a central figure in the story. And but there were some white activists that sent letters to powerful figures, but I think it was to no avail.
I'll leave that for listeners to. Now, this is this is 100 years ago, so letters were a little different at that time. Period, a lot more people read at that time period. But that notwithstanding, and that even, you can reconsider my point earlier where I said, now where would be the places in Pennsylvania where the racists don't have the lion's share of power? Because this certainly does not seem like an example. And I don't know, we could pick other spots of Pennsylvania, but I don't know if it would be much different than now. I mean, he said they got the militias now.
I myself, as well as a lot of, I'm a staunch progressive. I'm for gun control and for all this, and so I'm part of the people that, along with a lot of black people and a lot of white people here, try to. Pennsylvania is the most swing state in the union, so these are really hard fought battles that I partake in now with my allies. But as you saw with the last election, we lost. So, I guess you do have a point, as hard as that may be, to accept that maybe they do have the lion's share of power here. You don't want to acknowledge that because you don't want to sit there and say that you're losing the fight. But, that's why, because a lot of us want to keep our spirits up, saying we can still win these battles, which is, I guess, why it's why I probably express it differently, because I'm fighting alongside people and we all want to sit here and believe that we can win. But as you saw in the last election, we lost.
I will, that pronoun we, like, man, we lost. Like, was he talking about? Anyway.
Well, I just meant to say that I was aligned with, as you read with the book, I call for reparations. So it's fair to say that I'm fairly progressive in my views. And a lot, as James Lowen told me when I spoke to him, he said, yeah, there has to be reparations, which I called for. And but that puts me at odds. I can already tell you that most people here don't support reparations, whereas I did. And so when I say we, I meant the people that I'm an ally to. Because I try to sit there and show solidarity with them, even if there's disagreements at times. I try to sit there and say, I am an ally, but I will disagree with you from time to time, but I am here to fight with you. But that's probably why I try to sit here and say, I think that most people would agree with us. But again, sometimes it's very discouraging, like you saw with the Donald Trump victory. So that's what I mean when I say we, myself and the people that I'm aligned with.
I see. That, I will point out for listeners, I do not think white supremacy racism begins and ends with Donald Trump. Even when Joe Biden was in office, he was the one that said, if you don't vote for me, you're not even black. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, that's another one. I said, man, the same thing that you said about grouping black people together. I could not imagine Joe Biden going to talk to a group of white people anywhere and saying, hey, you are not even white if you don't vote for Joe Biden. Like, what? What?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me started on Joe Biden. I felt we could have filled. I have thoughts on the American politics, but focus should be on the work. But yeah, we haven't had as compelling a candidate as Barack Obama. And it's really hard to. That guy was as charismatic as they come, but there hasn't been anyone really to fill his void. And Joe Biden had so many problems. But let's just focus on the work. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, sir. One
of
my favorite words pops up in this book where you talk about the NAACP. Like I said, black journalists in general, and then the NAACP, other black organizations at this time period that were trying to address racism and even got involved with this case, as the NAACP did. This is the chapter National Furor. You write, it's kind of middle of the page. The NAACP was a relatively new organization at this time, 1923, having begun in 1909. In establishing it, the activists challenged the color line and started a national struggle for full legal and civic equality. James Weldon Johnson took the NAACP's top position in 1920, and he was deeply involved in conversations regarding the future of black America and the search for effective activist methods. Johnson, the second black individual and the first Southerner to serve in an administrative position in the organization, brought fresh vision, vitality, and a remarkable amount of experience to the NAACP. Dr. William G. Jordan said that Johnson was eloquent and militant. That word pops up in here a few times in the book, not in quotes. What do you mean when you say militant?
Wait, can you repeat the questions? Because I think I lost the train of thought whenever you were going over James Weldon Johnson. That I said that he was militant?
Yes, that's in the paragraph here.
Just what generally do you mean? When I say, because my portrayal of James Weldon Johnson is heroic, so when I say militant, I don't mean it in a negative context. I meant he was I should have said defiant, but I meant it in a praiseworthy way. The other thing about James Weldon Johnson, you probably knew this, I didn't, but he was the leader of the Harlem Renaissance too. He was probably the most influential leader within it, and he networked with Langston Hughes and Count Collin and all them. And so really a Renaissance man and a remarkable leader at the time. And he, I think, along with Robert Bann of the Pittsburgh Courier, are the central heroes of the story in protecting their own community.
He says defiant. If he was picking a synonym, defiant, he meant it in a heroic way, which it comes across. I'll give folks a different section of the book where you're talking about Mr. Johnson and his service, combating racism his entire life, really. You write, the more violent white people were toward people in the civil rights movement, the more tested those within the movement were. Some wanted a more confrontational tack taken with the racists they were protesting. Others pointed to the progress they had made with the non-violent approach, arguing it should be continued. The Johnstown NAACP took a stance as the national movement was splintering between those who wanted to continue in the tradition of nonviolent protest and those who wanted a more militant mentality. Leaders in the city's branch disavowed the Black Power movement as the latter philosophy was known. There it is again. So what do you mean when you say militant?
Well, militant, I mean, in that context, the NAACP, there was two, and you probably are a greater expert on this because I didn't spend most of my time on it. There was the Marcus Garvey, which was more, maybe militant wasn't, and again, the imperfect book, but Marcus Garvey was the Back to Africa, and I think I was just trying to delineate the pluralism within the different views on the path to racial equality. And that was probably an imperfect and awkwardly explanation for that. But the NAACP wanted to integrate, and I think if I remember correctly, Marcus Garvey wanted to go back to Africa. And so there was a disagreement. And I think there were a lot of civil rights leaders, black leaders that came to Johnstown that I went through 7 years worth of microfilm. And there's a discussion about how certain black people, and I think Ralph Proctor was the one who explained this to me, that certain black people felt this is the direction the movement should take, and then this is the direction that the movement should take. And I think that was all I was trying to sit there is show the disagreements. But I think that was awkwardly, in hindsight, probably awkwardly explained there.
Much obliged for giving some of your thought process on that. That's one of those, I think I said when I began that's one of my favorite terms, just I've noted over the years, and particularly for the context that I'll see frequently individuals who are classified as black, like Mr. Johnson, they will be classified as militant. Myself also, they'll say that I'm militant. And when I look at the definition of that term, it implies that you might even have some sort of violent response. And I pointed out with white authors in this book, the only people who are described as militant are black. Now, we're in a book.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Hang on, because I'm just putting that in context that we're in a book where we're talking about black people being banished at gunpoint, the threat of violence, get out of here right now.
Yeah.
That's not labeled as militant. And I've talked where consistently, matter of fact, we had one author, she described a black male as militant. He was in a photograph where he was the only person visibly who was not armed. He was sandwiched in between two white people who visibly had, these are enforcement officers. They had big guns and ammunition and all of that backup. He's there by himself and unarmed, but he is militant because he had whatever opinion or what have you. You've got all of these white people, some of them racist, gotta be, with guns. They're not militant. That's what I mean. Like it almost seems like what you said about the presentation of black people. When black people commit crimes, it's all the black people are lumped in together for vice. It's the same type of thing.
Yeah, and I agree. Again, the book was imperfect, and I was a white author, and at that point, to be honest with you, I wasn't an Uber and Jitney driver in black neighborhoods, and I also didn't since then, because I've, there's often whenever you're trying to establish trust, there's a lot of reluctance at first, but over the course of the last 6 years, which I've consistently engaged black people, so my understanding and ability to portray them is far more nuanced, and it isn't terms like militant, like when you explain it, like when I think about how I wrote it then, it strikes me as more thoughtless, whereas I should have given the same level of thought that you gave to it, which is why these conversations are important, because you grow as a person. You say, yeah, that you're right about that. And so there are, again, in future editions of the book, if it's still in print, things and descriptions like that would be changed probably to be more specific. And you're absolutely right that the white people were more militant in protecting their interests than and black people were being completely reasonable in what they were calling for. But that's one of those things that, it's 10 years ago, and whenever you're learning the process of these things, learning all these histories, you use terms that aren't the best terms to use, and are a reflection of being a white author at the time that has limited exposure. But I still think that even so, that the book added value to the conversation, even as imperfect as it was. But you're right, I shouldn't have used that term.
Appreciate the honesty, Mr. McDevitt. Words are important. We spend a lot of time talking about words here. Before we let you enjoy the rest of your evening, the section where I was talking about the differentiation between blacks, because the edict was from the white mayor, blacks and Mexicans beat it. But I thought this was fascinating, and this, again, your credit as a researcher, one of the letters that Mayor Caulfield, say it again, was it Caulfield? Am I saying it right? Caulfield?
Caulfield.
Okay. Mayor Caulfield.
Yeah.
So he gets into it with the governor, that you were telling us about before. So people have been writing the governor. Maybe people have been writing the governor from all over the world, Mexico, who knows, and saying, what is going on? And you're not enforcing the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. So the mayor, Caulfield, he writes the governor, and this is his explanation as to why this has to be done. So he says, Johnstown has been overrun by many Negroes from the South. Paroled from the southern prison. What? From the southern prisons. Inside of 3 weeks' time, 3 of our officers have been buried. 2 are lying in the hospital, mortally wounded. 1 is recovering. All this is due to a shooting affair by a Negro crazed by moonshine and dope. Our citizens were aroused, and we had difficulty in maintaining order. The citizens could not distinguish between Mexicans and the copper-colored Negroes, and for their own protection and the preservation of the good name of our city, they were advised to leave. Only the lawless ones were advised to leave. What in the world? I found fascinating on so many levels, because as I said, it seems like the Mexicans, even though it's included Mexicans and blacks, the Mexicans are not being treated the same, because frequently this is what's said,
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, you all look a little too close to the black people, or you live around the black people, and we really don't even have a problem with you. Our problem is really with these black people, but we might mix you up, and some of y'all are kind of dark, so it's best that you like, am I reading incorrectly?
No, I mean, I think there's definitely at that time, and in some ways today, though, I think Latinos are being treated terribly today. And I think you'd probably agree that they're also being treated terribly. But yeah, at that time, I think black people, if there was a caste system, and you've read the great book by Isabel Wilkerson, Caste. I think at the caste system, immigrants were actually, even from Mexico, were probably higher than black people in America at that time.
Black get back. And that's pointed out by black people at that time. I just want to make that clear, because you did do a great job getting black journalists and what have you, where black people pointed this out, that, hey, they're not even we are U.S. citizens, man. Like, the Constitution is supposed to apply to us and protect us. Like, what do you mean kicking us out of here and you're going to be responsive just because you don't want to be embarrassed on the national stage by Mexico intervening? Like, anyway, I do think it is super important, because I learned a ton reading the text. The term I think that you used in the talk that you gave in Pennsylvania about all of this, it was National Racism Researchers. Is that an official title?
I know what I meant by that is I'm a regional. I've moved on to work on things like gun control and abortion and stuff, which is what I'm researching and about to publish a book on now. But at the time, I classified myself as a regional historian because it's a regional history book. Whereas I saw James Lowen and Elliot, who I've worked with Elliot to try to do other important watchdog journalism. He's actually a mentor of mine. But and I talked to James. I qualified their work as national journalists. You know, Ibram X. Kendi's a national researcher. John McWhorter's a national researcher. Isabel Wilkerson's a national researcher. So people that are far bigger deals than I am is what I meant to say. Insofar as they're doing the national work, whereas what I did was a regional book that serves as a footnote in their work.
I see. I did actually read Caste, Isabel Wilkerson. I read Warmth of Other Suns as well. Yeah. In my view, that is her excellent book, Warmth of Other Suns. Caste is the second worst book I've ever read. Oh my goodness. It is appalling. Even, in fact, what you said, you told us it took years for you to research and put this book together. Isabel Wilkerson, she testified that she took about 15 years to write The Warmth of Other Suns, and it shows it is immaculate. One of the best books that I've ever read, almost up there with Sundown Towns. Caste, she didn't say she took 15 years to write. She said that came together really quick, and also it shows, even that passage at the end that she concludes the book with, that tacky exchange where she goes to have dinner with a white person and they're practicing racism against her. Once again, where can we go where the racists don't have the lion's share of power? Can we go out to eat? No. So they go out to eat with her white friend, wink, wink, and they're practicing racism. And her white friend can see this, like, dang, do you see how they're treating you? This is terrible. And so they get up to leave, and Isabel Wilkerson says, see there, not all white people is racist. My white friend pointed that out. I said, are you serious? Like, there are many things that I could. Do you remember that part of the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I'm a huge fan of Isabel Wilkerson. I think she's one of the greatest writers in America. But yeah, I mean, there are, when I read books, and when I encounter authors or encounter anybody else, there are some things that I agree with and other things that I disagree with, and sometimes and that's true with any group of people or any author that you have. You're going to sit there and say, there's some things that I agree with Ibram X. Kendi, and then there's some things that I agree with John McWhorter, and then we don't have the time to go into that. But you end up reading those books, and as you say, like, you'll read it and you'll say, yeah, I agree that black people are in the bottom of the caste, but I don't agree with that part. So, I mean, I still think her book had value, but I Yeah, I mean, I sort of vaguely remember that, and that's, I guess, what she thinks.
That, wow, a book that I think has about, like, I do not have vague recollections about sundown towns. I have a lot of very specific recollections, some of them that I talked about today. That book I thought was very, in fact, I thought that book was deliberately dishonest. Like for many, one, she even says flatly that this is not a book about racism. That's what we talk about here. So I'm not even sure how that popped up in our conversation, because she says that a few times. She says that in every interview about that book. And out of the many things, that book, she does not name black people. The black victims of the Charleston Church massacre, none of them get named, and she has a number of black shootings, black males, privileged, where they get shot and killed by white people, and they don't get named, but she names Heather Hare repeatedly, and I pointed that out in the book, like, dang, like, why does Heather Hare get all of this shine, but all these black people, like, we can't even get a name? Come on. Like, no, I did not think it was constructive, or I thought it was the second worst book I've ever read about racism, and in fact, I thought it was so suspicious.
What was the worst?
What
was the worst? Just out of
currently, it's Alice Sebold Lucky, because that lie of a book got Anthony Moore, didn't get him, but they were going to make a movie about this whole nonsense that this black male raped her, and then turns out, whoops, not him, and they got all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct, and they lied about the lineup and all the rest. They were about to make a film. They were about to turn this book into a movie, and then whoops, wait a minute, we done locked up the wrong Negro, and he's been on a sex registry for like 30 years and all this, not, oh my God. And then when you read the book, it's even more appalling, because it's so flagrant that who believed this? But anyway, that's number one. But Isabel Wilkerson is a strong 2, second worst book I've ever read, and I never even make a charge like that. I think that book is deliberately dishonest. And what I was going to say, I find it suspicious that people classified as white, like Mr. McDevitt, would endorse and recommend a book like that. There's so many books that are published about racism all the time.
What I meant was, again, I didn't mean that specific part. I just meant the caste system, that yes, I mean, that certain people were at the top of the caste, and then black people were at the bottom of the caste. That was the only point that I was making.
We even started this program where you rejected the notion of hierarchy, even though I didn't say it in my definition. I remember that. That took up a lot of time.
Well, I take, let me just say that when I speak to people, I don't try to put on, I don't know where the conversation's going to go, and sometimes my mind changes even in interviews, but I think that that's an honest, a more honest approach to dealing with people is to be open-minded, to even speak to, podcast hosts and say, I think you're wrong about this, and then, when I go drive Uber tonight, I'll sit there and say, I think he's right. I think he maybe he made a point and I was wrong. But that's, when I sit there and I don't, when I have an interview on something, I try to really think and give my honest impression, because I want to sit here and have better views myself. So sometimes, I'm prone to error as well. So it's not, but that's the value of having a conversation with a radio host or anyone, because you can sit there and say, they'll make a point like this, but you didn't really think of it this way. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I didn't. But that's again why I think I grew as this conversation, and I think in any conversation with anybody who's asking probing questions, that's what's going to happen.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
That suspend. I said that from the beginning. You have to be very careful in conversations with white people, but even that, to me, for non-white people listening, that's not logical. The monolith that is the global system of white supremacy racism, you research this topic, you write about it. You were talking about going to Mexico City to get more information. You read James Lowen's book and Elliot Jaspin's book and Isabel Wilkerson. So you're not ignorant about racism. Newspapers.com, you're not ignorant. You would know regardless of who you're talking to. If someone says, is there a global system of racism? Like, wow, that would not change regardless of who I'm talking. That's not something, well, wait a minute now. I don't want to, even though I know that exists, I'm not Come on. That.
Well, I mean, I hadn't been asked the question phrased that way, and so like I'm trying to think of the answer on the spot. So I mean, if I had more time, I'm a writer, so I don't, when you're asking questions, sometimes you answer questions clumsily. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to revisit that part because let's just. We went through that. Most of the book was focused on my research, which is where I think I can offer value. I mean, me talking about something that I didn't research myself, I don't really think I'm really qualified to answer those questions. Maybe one of the national historians on race, or global historians on race would be better suited to answer that question.
I see, Mr. McDevitt. Well, I will appreciate it if you could maybe email me if you have some of the news snippets, what have you, on the South Bend,
sure.
Indiana purge, man, oh man, or maybe even if some of the info that you found on the corruption with Mr. Young and some of the officers, that would be great to attend, because I was going with what you read, like he was a bad dude, that Robert Young, and he was messing it up for the respectable black people, and turns out he might have just been a victim of corrupt white police officers, and there's been a lot of that down through the years. So, sorry, Robert Young.
I'll send you everything that I found if you want to sit there and share it with your listeners. Did your listeners have any questions that I can try to answer? I mean, I got to go drive Uber pretty soon just to pay the bills, but I can sit here and answer a few questions from listeners if they want to.
Let's see, *61. Any of the folks, if you have a question for Mr. McDevitt, let's see, victim times 3 joining in. Did you have a question for? Wait a minute, before you can get your question and all that stuff. That's fine, but I just want to make sure that I'm not acting goofy here. Maybe I drunk some bad eggnog. I did get a lot of good vegan eggnog, right. But victim times 3. Did you hear the beginning of the program by chance? And if you did you hear Mr. McDevitt? He came on, he said, oh no, that's hierarchy and I reject all of that. And then he came around and said, yeah, I read Caste, Isabel Wilkerson. She's great, hot looking, great book. And that racial hierarchy, did you hear that? Because that's like, wow, you gave both answers took both sides to the same question. Did you hear that?
Hello, Gus, taking my call. And to answer your question, yes, I did hear that. It was during the time when you asked him, I believe, for the third or the second time about the definition. Then he, I guess, in my opinion, deflected to a hierarchical answer. But yes, I did hear that.
Making sure I'm not being loony. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You got it.
Yes. Mr. Devitt, okay. My question is, do you think it will be logical, considering what you've been studying and what you learned about Pennsylvania, I believe, do you think it will be logical for victims of white supremacy to suspect that any and all white people could be a white supremacist?
I can understand why they would come to that conclusion, but part of what I've tried, and again, I'm not trying to deflect, I'm just sitting here saying that in building bridges, you don't want everybody to think that every white person is a white supremacist. So when I'm trying to do the work in the black community, I want to sit there and say that most of us, at least to try to build trust. Now, maybe if you're a scholar, you can sit there and say, yeah, but they actually are. But when I'm trying to sit there and build bridges, I try to build trust by saying that a lot of us, maybe most of us, want to, and this is where I'm an activist too, because I also do activist work. I try to sit there and say most of us want a better world where black people are treated better. So as a scholar, you can sit there and say, but most, statistics or most studies indicate that white people have this view. But whenever you're really working as a white person in the black community trying to build trust, you don't want to sit there and say, yeah, most of us are white supremacists. But I think that's my answer to the question is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Mr. Davis, just so I'm clear with your response, you said it is logical. Am I correct?
I think if you did scholarly work, you can argue for that. But I don't think that, at least from my own experience, and there's a nuance that I see, that there are some people that I talk that are just when I say appallingly, I mean they're calling for like murder and hate crimes. And I'm not trying to narrow down racism. I'm just trying to say that some of it seems far more criminal and dangerous. So I don't think that I don't think every person. Let me put it to you that way. I don't think every white person that black people talk to is a white supremacist. Now, if you want to say most people, I'm not qualified to sit here and say most, or that would be something that I would have to, if I was going to go from a scholarly viewpoint, I would have to do some more research and to prove it in text. But as just an anecdotal point, no, I don't think most white people are white supremacists. But that's, again, I know that I'm speaking as a white person, and I'm trying to sit here and build trust with the black community, and I'm trying to sit here and say, at least from my perspective, I'm trying to sincerely build a better world where black people are treated more humanely and have the same opportunities as young white people, despite the poverty, the criminalization, and everything else.
Mr. Devitt, you did not answer my question. I suspect that could have been an act of white supremacy with the amount of verbiage you used. But that'd be it for me, Gus. Thanks for taking my call, and I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, victims times 3. If we have any other callers who have a question, *61. Any of our folks in Pennsylvania, if you have a question, I suspect we don't have too many folks in Beaver County, too many non-white listeners in Beaver County or some of the other rural parts of western Pennsylvania where the militia folks live. I doubt we have non-white victims in those regions. Let's see. Before I'll keep an eye out and see if other callers have a question. You said that not all white people are racist, which I might have heard once or twice before. But you said you're not qualified to pick it out if it's most or what percentage and all that stuff. Got it.
You're right. If you're asking me to do the national, this is where Ibram X. Kendi and John McWhorter and Isabel Wilkerson and James Lowndes died.
I just want to point out for our listeners, that was another list of non-white people, like I said before. And hey, there are tons of non-white people. There are tons of non-white people who agree that not all white people are racist. John McWhorter, yes, got it. But my question specifically was going to be, can you differentiate between the white people who are racist and the white people who are not racist? Do you have like a flawless method for distinguishing between those two different groups of people classified as white?
I guess what I was, and I'm just trying to answer your question as directly as I can. What I was trying to explain, maybe I didn't do it adequately, and you're looking for a yes or no answer, is that there was more virulent strains of it than more dangerous strains than or dangerous in a more mortal, like they could kill people type ways. Whereas the subtlety of structural racism and poverty and everything. So yeah, I think that white supremacy does prevail, but it prevails in different ways. And I can't ignore that as somebody who's going out and seeing the poverty and the blight and the condition of roads and the poor snow removal and everything. So I can't sit here and tell you that white supremacy doesn't prevail here. I just think that certain people are more virulent than others.
He said that before, more extreme. I said that was important before, more virulent. That's important now because that makes it sound like you don't really have white people that are not racist. You just got some that are more racist than others like that, which the evidence would suggest that that's probably true. But my question specifically was, and we're trying to be scholarly. I believe you said in the response, if you are being scholarly, looking at the evidence, well, yeah, all white people being racist, evidence might, yeah, you might have something. We're trying to be scholarly about this. But my question, which is why I'm going back to my question. Hang on. My question was that you didn't answer. Do you have a method that's flawless for distinguishing between the white people who are racist and the white people who are not racist?
No, I don't. And that's a fair point to make. Yeah, that's a fair. I mean, that's again where I'm trying to go in as an activist and trying to do following my instincts and anecdotal evidence. But that isn't appropriate for scholarship. But it depends on what your role is in a community, because I'm not just a scholar anymore. I've actually gone in as an activist, and so the roles are different, and you know, your approach is different. But I don't have a method, so that is a fair point to make.
Lots of usage of the word fair this here evening, but much of that's another one. Thank you for your honesty. And hey, that would be another reason why I would say, hey, maybe we should stop saying not all white people are racist. If we can't even, if the racists are so slick, either the racists are so slick we can't pick them out, or it is true, all white people are racist. If that's true, we should just say that so then we can make accurate scientific calculations to solve this problem. But I mean, at minimum, the fact that we can't even make a distinction, wow, that's a serious problem. Like, what's going on here? Like, it would give tremendous pause and thought. And he even said I could see why a reasonable person would conclude, oh yeah, all white peoples is racist. Yeah, I could see how you could look at the evidence and go, hey, we can go get funding for that museum? No. Okay. Well, we have been chatting it up about the book Banished.
I mean, and I try to have a candid conversation, because I mean, I'm literally in like places like McKeesport and Homewood, and if you know anything about Pittsburgh, those are the predominantly black neighborhoods. So I see the difference, obviously, insofar as the size of the homes, the conditions of the roads, the conditions of the schools, the fact that all the alleyways are overrun with you know, weeds and everything, and then there's potholes all over the place that never get fixed, and roads. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's no question that when you see the structural problems, if you did like do a scholarly, and a great piece would be like, let's talk about the condition of infrastructure in the black community versus condition of infrastructure in white communities, and that would be, if you wanted to prove that white supremacy prevails, that would definitely be something that you could do on a national scale. Like, look, and then you could do pictures and videos, like, look at this versus look at this. But again, I'm also trying to build trust. So maybe sometimes you don't take the scholarly viewpoint whenever you're trying to build trust. You're trying to sit there and reassure people in a system that, if you were a scholar, you're sitting there saying, yeah, I mean, there are definitely structural and institutional and maybe even prevailing white supremacy here if you look at the inequity and the conditions of these neighborhoods versus the ones that you go into that are humongous houses, multi-car garages, you know, the whole, and I'm sure you guys have been through those neighborhoods too. But yeah, when you see the disparity, I can certainly understand and maybe even agree that white supremacy prevails. But I'm also trying to go into these communities, and I'm going to continue to go into these communities, whether as an author, playwright, screenwriter, activist, whether for abortion or gun control or anything, or as somebody who wants to preserve history. And I'm going to try to continue to build trust through conversations like these, where, you know, where I start at one point and maybe end in a different, and maybe build trust with this small number of people that I can.
Got it. Before we let you depart, Mr. McDevitt, the rape accusation. Oh, you even told her. Oh, yeah, the case about the sniper. If you got reports on that in Pennsylvania, I'll look myself, but if you got reports on the sniper who was shooting the black dude in a sexual arrangement with a white person, that would be great as well, because I would share that also. I would be super grateful. I'll do my own diligence on that one too.
Yeah, I'll send you whatever I have, and then you can, when you discuss James Lowen's work or anyone else's, then You can say, yeah, Cody, son. You can just call me Cody from now on if we ever do anything in the future. Because I'm actually just coming out with a new book that goes heavily into reproductive justice, which is a very important part of the reproductive rights movement, and I'm talking extensively about that. But if I ever come on again, you can just call me Cody. It just be more familiar, and then you can sit there. And I have to come on again because I enjoy these conversations, and I enjoyed this conversation as even with the debating part. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Learning, no debate, just learning. But
yeah.
Much obliged. It'll be Cody in the future, but Cody McDevitt, author of Banished from Johnstown, given all the information. I will never process the Pittsburgh Steelers the same again. Man, Steel Curtain will now have a totally different meaning for me completely. But
yeah.
Mr. Cody,
we could win the Super Bowl this year, man. We could win the Super Bowl this year, but I think Seattle's a good team.
Right on.
We got Aaron Rodgers.
He's and at Green Bay, that's a racially restricted region in Green Bay too. But yes, right on. And Aaron Rodgers, we trust. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Mr. McDevitt. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening and your holiday, sir.
All right, guys. Thanks. Merry Christmas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Cody McDevitt, award-winning author. He is the founder of the Oral History Project in Rosedale, out there in Western Pennsylvania. Man, I have been to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania one time. Okay. Man, I was ignorant. I didn't know anything about the Pennsylvania area or Western Pennsylvania. I didn't know the geographic breakdown and all that of the region. But, oh, man, if I ever go back, do not venture into West Pennsylvania. Militias, they got the James Earl Ray posters, and woo, man, stay away.
If you ever do, there's a place called Coney Island Hot Dogs that's in Johnstown, and then there's another place in Homewood, which is a black neighborhood in Pittsburgh, called Showcase Barbecue, which is the best barbecue in Pittsburgh. And then go to both those places if you ever do decide to come back.
I don't have to dodge the militia for hot dog, but right on, Mr. McDevitt. Keep up the good work, and I will be on the lookout for your email, sir.
All right, thanks. I'll send it tomorrow if I get the chance.
I won't be in a rush, man. It's celebrating season, they tell me. So, yes, whenever you get the time, sir.
All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Right on. Be well. Woo! Context of White Supremacy. Wowzers. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Context of White Supremacy Holiday Season Edition, I reckon.
And from the late 1960s, after the death of Martin Luther King and the riots and the upheavals and all like this, and black people with their fists in the air and all like that, and trying to stumble and fumble and find their way and get focus, the white supremacists made a blueprint and put it into action. And that is, I'm going to have these people so confused, they don't even know what they started out to do. And by the late 1970s, they had just about completed it. And we've been on that ever since. And you mentioned something very important. They are more comfortable than ever. But see, it's like making gorillas comfortable in a cage, or monkeys, or pandas. You still got them in a cage, but they're comfortable. See, so give him some bling bling. It's like giving an animal a brand new car and training the animal to ride up and down the street in it. And then you stand back and point at the animal. Like one white man said in the late 1950s. He said he doesn't care what kind of car a Negro has. He said he's still a nigger. And when he rides by in a shiny car, to him, it's just a monkey in a car. White people built a car, put a monkey in it, trained the monkey to drive the car, so now you're looking at a monkey in a car. See, but black people don't see themselves that way. But this is how the white supremacists see us, and they are the ones who run our business. And we have to know that when they look at us, that's what they see. That's what they see. That's what they see. And at a subliminal level, what they see begins to spill over into our brains so that we, at a subliminal level, see each other that way. And indirectly see ourselves that way.
No holidays for the context of white supremacy. So today is the 23rd. We're here the 25th, or I guess we do get New Year's Eve, if that. So we get New Year's Eve to cut a fool, and then we're here for Neutralizing Workplace Racism on the 25th, Catherine Massey Book Club on the 26th, and Compensatory Call-In on the 27th. So I guess I do get New Year's Eve to cut a fool and drink all the eggnog I would like. That said, notwithstanding, I would heavily encourage what our guest, Mr. McDevitt, said about research. Newspapers.com, they have so many different websites. So if you're in New York State, they have an archive free where you can research New York State newspapers. They have some African American publications in that archive as well. They have just so many databases where older newspapers are being digitized, so you can go through and do searches and just find all I've said for years, study the local system of white supremacy. If you live in Pennsylvania, hey, I guess maybe if you live closer to Philadelphia, that's on the opposite eastern side of the state, maybe this is, you don't feel as much of a connection to this. But they did have the lynching, Zachariah Walker, that worthless Negro from Virginia, that was on the eastern side of Pennsylvania. So, and about the same time period too. So just pick wherever you are, whichever library you have access to. He said he went to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Lots of black people live there. Mr. Fuller said he went to the Library of Congress. Go. They have all kinds of, and they have wacky books that you wouldn't even see anyplace else. If you live close to a major university, even community college, go to their library. They'll have digital archives where you can go. You can access your local paper, current edition, more recent archives, and then the older archives, especially bigger newspapers in your state or region. They'll have that. Go check it out. A lot of times you can get PDFs and such, or links to those reports for free. Put them on your flash drive or email them to yourself. Have them forever. Do so, and encourage, if you have offspring, encourage them to be engaged in these sort of projects. I said if I had offspring and they were on so-called holiday break right now, if they were in so-called college or if they were in school, Cameron Graham, you are not going to sit around like old Gus T and eat cakes and pies and all the Christmas goodies, gain all that eggnog aplenty, doing nothing, and not even exercise your brain. You're not going to crack a book. You're just going to watch television the whole time. The Home Alone and Macaulay Culkin the whole time. Nope. Even if you live someplace where it snows, you got inclement weather and it's hazardous to drive, you can get on the computer, turn the Netflix off. We can go, he said, newspapers.com. They have many other, that's not the only one. They have many other websites where you can go. We will you don't know who Cameron Graham is? Great. We will go. Let's research Cameron Graham, and it could be you give me a 2-page report. Give me a video project, something on Cameron Graham. You researched it. You got your sources where you got this information from. Bam. Give us a presentation on it. Work your brain computer during the and if you live someplace where, hey, the weather is not terrible, you're not about to be flooded and float away or have toilet rats come and nab you when you go to do your business. Man, we about to die in Seattle, man. They got it in the paper about the toilet rats and all because of the flood and everything. You can't even go to the John without the toilet rats coming to nab Yo Johnson. Anyway, but hey, they could research that, like the flooding in Seattle or whatever, climate change, whatever. But pick something. If they have areas that they're already interested in, and then certainly you can tie that to the system of white supremacy, racism. But research, if you don't have offspring, this can be your personal project. Pick something, area where you grew up. If you have an area of study, something you went to school, study about medicine, whatever it is, pick something. He's got a new book coming out on, sounded like medical apartheid type thing, probably. Absolutely. Maybe he'll send me a copy of the book too. But pick something, research that is way more important than watching TV, like exponentially more important. Research. That said, I will say, man, I said about this time last year, I had just come back from California, Johnstown trip, transformative travel experience, counter-racist travel experience. I did exactly what he said. That's why I whined and begged, broke Negro, man, want to go California, Jim Jones. I did exactly what he said. And wow. Yes, you might not have to do all that because I said repeatedly, I could have just stayed here and went to the university library and what have you, which I did gleefully and got so much data. So, yes, do that. Anyway, this time last year, I was coming back from California, and I said, man, I'm estranged from Cal's listeners, non-white people, and do my thing. United Independent, man. We are United Independent. Even some of it said, like, some of this being around not all white peoples is racist. I said, no problem, because that's most non-white people. So I said, no problem. We are United Independent, and I'm estranged from y'all, victims of racism. Gus T is not counter-racism. You not no attempted counter-racist scientist? No problem. We're estranged. But I say the same thing that I've been saying for 17 years. What you heard today when Gus T not on holiday, man, so where are the other folks where they talk to white people? Because I am not about sitting around going back and forth with victims so that other victims to say not all white people is racist. Where's the one where they talk to white people? I don't even have no debate. I was chilling today. I had my yerba mate tea, had my water. What you mean militant, Mr. McDevitt? Even definition of racism, we got to go through all this chat. You can't even just say no, and then we get to the end. Oh yeah, I done read me some Isabel Wilkerson. That racial hierarchy thing is real. Like, man, come on to point that out with a white man or woman. Doesn't make me no different. White woman, white man. I said it's a matriarchy, so really. But whatever. Counter-racism code, as Mr. Fuller articulated, is supposed to be used to talk to people classified as white. I thought he had questions in the book specifically to ask people classified as white. Maybe my memory is bad. On my counter-racist assignment and still maximally estranged from victims of racism. In fact, I would be Robert Young. That's the viewpoint that I have most of the time as a victim of racism. Robert Young. I got to read you this letter. He has some great letters that some of the victims, black people, wrote from this time period. Oh my God. This is Negro culture. This is Negro culture. I cracked up laughing. That part where Fuller talks about black. Oh my God. Let me hear it. And I told you, so they blamed all this, said we got this no count. Robert Young, he came from the South, worthless Negro from Virginia like Gus, and he came up here around these good white people and messed everything up, and we got good black people. Well, yeah, what I said, good colored people, and we behave, and we just get rid of Robert Young, and we'll do the right thing, and we sure do wish you white people well. What? Look here, they said, trouble broke out. This is from the Chicago Defender. Trouble broke out in Johnstown during the absence of the mayor, Simmons said. Colored men, maybe one or two fresh from the South, were too handy with guns, much handier in Johnstown than below the Mason-Dixon line. Beverly may pick its ground. Courage never. Your preachers north might preach from the text, thou shalt not kill, and tell newcomers in toting guns and killing people who haven't done anything to them, they make it hard on those who want to be somebody. Simmons commented that thousands of black men seemed bent on proving that they were troublemakers. Razors, get it right, razor-toting, gun-carrying must be cut out in the North. Simmons said, you got that stuff from white people South. Nobody likes a tough, bad race. If you can't behave yourselves in your new home among people who wish you well, who give you a helping hand, overlook many, many shortcomings. They got to emphasize, like, you got a whole lot of deficits, Southern Leroy. Go back home. I said, woo-wee. They would be talking about Gus T. Me and Robert Young are one and the same. Like, eh. But that might not even be. It might be the corrupt cops were messing over Robert Young, but they got lots of these types of letters and such where black people, once this happened, and they knew we're going to be blamed. They're going to say that, oh, Robert Young, who killed these police officers, you were his cousin. That's your nephew. That's your grandson. That's your brother. You helped him. You told him to do it. You cheered him on. We're going to get all of y'all. And really, that's still the way white people operate like too. And in fact, we heard this last year. The National Association of Black Journalists, this 2024, they had President Trump come and talk to them on the campaign trail. And they asked him, really asked him one of the questions that I wanted to ask. What do you mean black job? What does that mean exactly? And we had people come on this broadcast and say, man, she asked that question and got rude and nasty with President. Well, they didn't come on the broadcast. They wrote on the Cow's page. I'll be accurate. They didn't come on the platform. They wrote on the Cow's social media page, one of them, saying that this black journalist victim, her asking this question, this was going to cause all the rest of the black people in the U.S. to be punished once President Trump gets back to the White House. I said, what? Like, one, I did not think she was rude, discourteous, or unprofessional in the questions that she asked, in her tone, nothing. She was totally professional, and it was some of the exact questions that I wanted to ask. But we frequently, non-white people, attempting to address racism, we militant, radical, dangerous, that sort of is very even from other non-white people. That's another point I cannot stress enough. There were so many points during the discussion where this white man, Mr. McDevitt, a racism researcher, he consistently pivoted back to other black people. Isabel Wilkerson, John McWhorter, black people in Pennsylvania, consistently, and on important issues. That's why victims guaranteed qualify. Like I said, frequently white people do this, and it'll be with a deceased non-white person. James Baldwin, that's a real popular one. Frantz Fanon, it might be Dr. Martin Luther King. They'll pick some non-white person who is revered now that they're deceased and say, oh yeah, well, this non-white person had this perspective or this view on the system of white supremacy, so you have to agree with it. And most of the time it'll be something that is totally inaccurate. You gotta agree, like, not all white people is racist. They might even start saying, hey, Neely Fuller Jr. said not all white people is racist. Well, victims guaranteed qualified to Neely Fuller Jr., who came up with the concept, but they will consistently reinforce an incorrect or deliberately incorrect point. Well, these non-white people said thus and such and so on and so on. So what? We are not looking for consensus amongst non-white people victims of racism really on any point, and especially we are not looking for consensus while the system still exists. Like, come on. Anyway, but that's something I pay attention to. That, like, for me, that is mightily suspicious. I put that up there with, I ask you, system of racism, give you a definition. At least you could just be a man. No, it's incorrect. I'm an expert. This is the definition. No problem. Let's hear it. We got to waste all that time and sounding like you want to say no, but you're too cowardly, deceptive, really, to just say no. You come back, say yes, and then he added all that about hierarchy. I said that at the very beginning. I said, man, I didn't say anything about no hierarchy. It is black get back. You do have a racial hierarchy. That's in the book. But I just asked, global system, people classified as white, they mistreat everybody as not white. Ooh, that's like a cabal. I don't know. We got no. And then we get to the end. Yeah, you know, Isabel Wilkerson, that is about what we got. You know, black people at the bottom, and back of the boat, bottom of the bus, you know, or back of the boat, bus, bottom of the boat, you know, the black people, they're going to be stomped on. Like, come on. And then they give some lame justification. Well, I'm not going to start no podcast interview just, you know, coming out and agreeing with what the host say. I didn't come out and say, all right, we're going to start off that. First question, am I the most brilliant, intelligent, and amazing podcaster in the history of the universe? Yes or no? We didn't start with that. This is your field. You publish on racism. You're a racism researcher. You have to have a definition for racism. At minimum, it would be, no, that definition is not accurate. This is the definition. No problem. Let's hear it. Suspicious. That's what I suspect, or that's what I expect from a racist. Deliberately so, I would add. Also, I can't add enough. Those black people, it's such a massive pattern to me, and I guess to emphasize the first thing I said, once we had our intermission, our guest departed, research. We are so ignorant about racism. We, meaning non-white people, people classified as black. We are so ignorant about racism. Matter of fact, I'm thinking of the books that I'm aware of that are about racial purges, where white people booted out all of the black people. It would take them. I would have to sit and think. I think there's one about Tulsa. There's a black male. He's the one. He came to Washington State and talked to us. There's one. Most of the books that are written about these racist purges, they are not written by black people. It's what I said when we were reading Evelyn Williams' Inadmissible Evidence, Assata Shakur's aunt, where I said, man, she wrote a book and it's talking about the history of Wilmington, North Carolina, and the history of racism in this area. She didn't mention the Wilmington Purge, 1898. Her parents were born literally like a year before the purge, within like 2 years max. Not one sentence about this event, and what they're still talking about what a massive impact that had on black people in the area, economics, all of that. Nothing. She didn't know. Neely Fuller Jr., Tulsa, he didn't know. Black male who I was in a tent. Matter of fact, I was going to go and talk to this black male, privileged black male. I think he was in his 70s, but I'm not sure. I'm bad at guessing age and such. But I think he was in his 70s. But he got up to speak, and he said, yeah, I was born in the Tulsa area. I didn't know nothing about it. I get a total F. I didn't hear nothing about it. We didn't learn nothing about it. Nobody said anything about it. He said, decades past. I had moved out of Oklahoma and been gone for decades. And that's the first time I learned anything about it. I said, what? What you mean? They did what? In Tulsa? What? And I said, wow. I want to go talk to him. I'm going to go ask him and see. And then I was with another victim. They said, what you going to ask him? He just told you. I didn't know nothing about it. And I said, well, no. Lee said, and I sat there and I said, yeah, well. And then I couldn't think of none of that. Like he already said, I didn't know nothing about it. Like, what are you going to, like, woo, we are pitiful. Gus T at the top of the list. Gus T, renegade, extra pitiful. But that can be correct. That's why I said, like, we can't be reading no fiction. Like, if this wasn't the case, if we weren't so pitiful, who cares? We could go and sit around and get your Harry Potter, man. We're going to get you a gold leather-bound edition of the Harry. Go on and get all of them and just read until your heart that we're going to get you a hate you give too. Who cares? It wouldn't matter. Hey, Turner Dyers, really, he brought that one up. That's fiction too. Throw that in there too. Who cares? We are in pitiful shape, man. Like, Jesus. Man, if you don't get a book on these racial figure out how many racial purges they had where you live. How many racially restricted regions are in your county? That might have an impact on your life, impact some of your travel decisions. You got offspring, how they move around the state. You're in Indiana, make sure you don't go to Whitestown carelessly. Any hoodles. We'll see if folks have thoughts what they heard from Mr. McDevitt. I did not know about the militias in rural Pennsylvania. I haven't been to Pennsylvania in a long time, but I did know he agreed immediately, no hesitation, about those insurrectionists from J6 that went down from Pennsylvania. We talked about some of them repeatedly. Like, man, I would keep all of that. He said the dude had the truck where he was riding around with the black mannequin hanging from the grill of the truck. What white people are ignorant about racism? I got a flag. This is we love you, James Earl Ray. And then got a black mannequin hanging off the bumper of the truck as I'm riding around. That's like James Byrd Jr. That's what I was thinking. James Byrd Jr., right? You dragging him from the, If anyone is ignorant about racism, right here. Victim. Did you have commentary? Did we waste your holiday? You could have been drinking eggnog, getting rid. I think they got bowl games on and all that good stuff, wrapping presents, like whole lot of goodies. Did we waste your time? Did you get anything constructive from Mr. McDevitt?
I'm lactose intolerant, so no eggnog for me. But no, this was a very good use of my time and energy during the holiday weekend. I do appreciate it. I remember him stating that from his research in Pennsylvania, that there have been 400 of these purges of black people. And I thought to myself, when you, read the Buried in Bitter Waters, Elliot Jaffin, you did bring that author up as well. I believe he said in his book he recorded at least over 260 times. With this discrepancy, be called to have Elliot Jasper back on the show, Gus?
That's a good point. Like my man, Mr. McDevitt, was suspected racist. We're not homies. He said he's allies, so I'm your man, Gus T. You got white allies. That might be because it's been. I think he was a guest in 2010, if my memory is correct. So it's been 15 years since he was a guest on the program. Like, he might have done a lot more research since we spoke to him, the first time around. And he did say that, I went back and made a sound clip of that and everything, and how he arrived at the scientific way that he arrived at that specific number, 260. But man, that was why I asked that question first, because Mr. McDevitt, he did a talk in Pennsylvania about same book, right? And he said that. He's put that specific number on it. He said, I looked at the data and blah, 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 and the court scientifically, as a historian and a scholar, this happened about 400 times. I was thinking he was going to say 400 times in the U.S. He said 400 times in Pennsylvania. It's like, whoa. Like, what, man, even that. If I live in Pennsylvania, well, that is your research project for life. 400 times? What the hell? Like, what? Man, and then, so not all white people is racist. We ain't even talking about all the other places. India, because matter of fact, he said the one in South Bend. I don't even know if that came up in Sundown Town. I'm going to have to go back and look again because I couldn't find anything about that one. 1,500 black people. Beat it. They mad because Notre Dame ain't getting the college playoffs. Who cares? 1,500 black. Beat it. It might be cause, yes, to see what more have you learned over the time period, because that is one, like that's right up there with James Lowen, Sundown Town, in terms of books that had like massive impact on my like thinking and understand what does it mean to be white. What is System of White Supremacy, racism? I mean, Jesus, but I mean, yeah, that stood out to me. That was one of those questions. Like, I thought if he leaves, because it did sound like he was getting, rowdy, being racist for us. Like, you ain't gonna sit here and question me. Who do you think I'll get her? It's holiday time. I got eggnog. But I was gonna ask that one before he left. Like 400, like in Pennsylvania alone, like for real, like Jesus Christ, like. And then if you extrapolate out, like, man, so if it happened 400 times in Pennsylvania, how many times did it happen, like, in total in this part of the world alone? We didn't even get to, like, South Africa and all these other. Just here, like, is that on par with what it would be for all the other states? So that they have, like, 400, 500 of these in Indiana, 400, 500 of these in Illinois, 405 of these in New York. Like, man, come. That alone, I don't want to hear no more malarkey about white people being ignorant, or even really, that's the sort of thing that I look at like, come on, who are the not racist white people? 400 times just in Pennsylvania. That's supposed to be one of the cool North places, right? 400 times? That's a lot, but I was stymied when I heard the statistic, and then he doubled down on it. So yes, that would be something to consider to get Mr. Jaspin. Let's do it again, Mister. He said the same thing. He said when I asked him a definition of racism, he said, "Whoa, man, that's kind of maniacal. I don't know if I agree. You think you got something elaborate like that? Got that 400 times? Come on." I'm glad that, that stood out for other people as well, because, I mean, Jesus Christ, they say put a number on it, like, wow. Help me quantify white supremacy, racism, indeed. 400, Pennsylvania. Did you have anything else, sir?
Yes, sir. And he also went in and talked about, quote-unquote, reparations, and considering what the subject matter and the evidence that he looked up, and you just elaborated on, Gus, what would that even look like? I mean, people being displaced over 400 times in just one location, could you even find the descendants of those people? I mean, it just seems to me that Mr. Devitt or Cody, right? I guess wants to seem like he's doing quote unquote non-racist things, and overall, to me, it just looked like he's just practicing deception like any other white person would be. I believe you had a question you posed, I guess the lady guest you had a little while ago, like what would be different between a quote-unquote normal white person and a white supremacist, and she couldn't answer it either. So I remember also through this interview that he brought up when you talked about your definition, and he was trying to give a reason why he couldn't agree with it. He brought up Nazi Germany and how that was like collaborative and people working in tandem and stuff like that. But from what I've studied, Nazi Germany got those tactics from watching the plantations and slavery here in the U.S. So how can you not make that connection that, well, these people are working together here? Well, again, that just goes back to him. Just in my opinion, Mr. Devitt was practicing white supremacy on your broadcast.
Great point. I even can brag. Hey, we did just have that white woman from Germany. She did the exact same thing. White German woman. She came over, and she came here specifically to study James Lowen and the racially restricted regions. Like, how y'all keep all the niggras out of the towns in India? She said she went right by Whitestown. I get nervous because sometimes I have a colored boy in the car and we go by. Just talk to her. Absolutely. I think we even talked. I had to go back to listen to make sure I'm not lying to see if we talked about that. The racists in Germany coming here previously to, as you just stated, study racism. But yeah, and all of that is in Caste, incidentally, the Nazi German. I even think that part, them coming over here to study the racism, I think that might be in Caste too. Incidentally, all of that is a massive plug for the Catherine Massey Book Club, where we did read Caste right like hot off the press. I think it came out like the summer of 2020, right in the middle of the Rona, and it talks about the Rona within the book. We read it right. I think it came out August. We started reading it in August. Second worst book I've ever read. I think lots of the books that he mentioned. Elliot Jaspin. Oh well, we didn't read that. Pronouns. I read that for the interview with him, but. The Turner Diaries, he mentioned that. Matter of fact, that's how he pivoted out of my definition the first time before we even got to hierarchy. Mm-hmm. He said, yeah, Gus, but do you know after the book I was going to tell you, check out, man, the Turner Diaries. Like, I was not thinking he was going to say that, like, at all, because I don't know what that has to do with my definition. But I'm very glad we did read that Catherine Massey book. Like, that's one of the first books we read, too. That even, in fact, that's the only book I have ever considered we should read that again. Mentioned all the time, comes up. White people are out bombing, doing the exact things in that book right now. That is the only one that I thought, man, maybe we should read that one. Fiction, even. Maybe we should read that one again. But we've already read it. It is in the archives from way back. I think he had mentioned some other ones, too, that we had nabbed. Caste, obviously. I'm thinking the book, too, from what I read there. But anyway, reading is way more important than watching television. I cannot stress that enough. And even reading his book and the hierarchy that he disavowed, the Black Get Back. There were so many parts in the book where it came up that the so-called Mexicans, they were not treated like the black people in this exodus. He even wrote explicitly, I just forgot to include this paragraph, where he said few Mexicans in Johnstown actually left the city. The heads of Bethlehem Steel took steps to prevent them from becoming involved in trouble. Bethlehem Steel, come on. Of course we would do this right now. Caulfield, that's the white mayor, he's the one who actually issued the edict, like, niggras, get out of here, and Mexicans too, allegedly. Caulfield was satisfied that some were buying homes, and he did not want to treat them unjustly, talking about the Mexicans. The mayor's critics said the Mexicans simply paid no attention to him. And then he goes on to talk about these telegrams that were sent on behalf of the so-called Mexicans and trying to help them out. Like I said, the NAACP, they pointed this out at the time. This is from the Chicago Defender. It says, in justice to the governor, we might be willing to believe that he intended to act with a sense of justice before receiving the Mexican note of protest. Yet, on the other hand, we are impelled to recognize the fact that his action did not come prior to the note. It seems that the protests from such powerful organizations as the National Organization for the Advancement of Colored People elicited no response, nor did the appeals of thousands of individuals. Facts. We talking about some niggras. Who cares? Mexicans. And he said, I asked him, I said, so did Bethlehem Steel, did they intervene to do anything on behalf of the niggras? No, but they did for the Mexicans. Black get back. Not quite the same treatment, even though that would still be the system of white supremacy racism. And certainly I'm not saying that Mexicans are my homies. Hey, I'm not homies with the black people either. So, hey, I told you, I'd be Robert Young. He was one of the bad razor-toting niggras in the book. I don't even know if I'm going to make sure I get the correct razor reference, because I thought that was so funny, and it reminded me of Mr. Fuller. Let me make sure. That one's not it. Make sure. Okay, I did read the correct one. But, yeah, I thought of Mr. Fuller immediately in all of this that, man, the confusion amongst non-white people, and even that Mr. Fuller talked about that was black culture. I'm going to cut me somebody tonight. Who you going to cut? Another black person, where he talked about minimizing contact with black people. I'm not going out to the party and the dance. I'm not going out to the bar, the tavern, with black people, because he got his razor, and it's going to be it's not going to be constructive. Must they do something? They might have Mad Dog 2020, and things could go poorly quickly. And the police pushing all that too. Like, man, the police corruption aspect of that. If he does a edit or what have you, that would be important to include. Anyway, Elliot Jaspin, thank you for the reminder. I will put that down as a notation. That dude said he was an ally too. Like, man, what? And he kept telling us, like, I don't know if when he goes out to do other talks, like the video that I heard, he didn't keep emphasizing that he was an Uber driver in the poor black part of Pittsburgh. Like, that does not endear me to a white person. Like, you driving around poor black people in Pittsburgh, like, do you drive them for free? Do you give them free copies of Mr. Fuller's book, Dr. Welsing's book, your book? Do you snitch on them about other racists? And like, I mean, and even if you did all that, you'd still be a racist suspect. You tell them, man, you better watch out when you go in the rural part, man. They got the militias out there. You make sure they know all that. They got all that information so they can make safe choices and all that. Come on. Like, white ally, that's another one. Because not all white people are racist. It's very easy to get to white ally, white friend, white wife even. Nonsense it all is, man. And how do we have white allies? He said, hey, man, after all that prodding, do you have a flawless method of picking out who is a racist and who is a white person who is not a racist? No. How we got all these white allies? Like, wait a minute. Let's just, racist, that's the only label that you need, period. I'm white, racist, and leave it at that. Nothing else. I will add, when the young lady was here last week, Dr. Leib, I believe it was well-meaning white, unless my memory is bad, that I asked for a distinction, and we got the same thing. And we got some giggles there, too. Like, can you pick out, so the well-meaning white person, the difference between them and the regular old white people who I guess got the, we love James Earl Ray, that sort of thing. And she's like, oh, go. That's a good point, Gus. Not funny at all. That's what I don't disaggregate white people. I don't do all that. Republican and Democrat and low class and high class and poor and rich and well-meaning. I don't do none of that. Are you classified as white? Okay. That's it. We got it right there. We don't need nothing else. White man, white woman, white child. You can give us all the other stuff if you think that's important. I'm a Democrat, a socialist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist. Okay. We got LGBTQ. We got, okay. You said you were white? Yeah. He even did that too. I said, are you classified as white? He said, well, then, I'm an Irish American. Wait a minute. We didn't. Jesus Christ. We can't even. He was slick from the opening bell. Even that. Like, wait a minute. White, man. White. Yeah. I'm. Does he tell when he's doing the Uber ride? I'm an Irish American. I get wild for St. Patty's Day, man. Hey. What? Come on, man. Whew. What does it mean to be classified as white? Anyway, don't be fooled for that either. It is so common, and don't bully them. Or this victim's guarantee qualified me. Non-white people can take any stance, but Do not bully other non-white people if they say racism doesn't exist, or they say not all white people are racist, or whatever it is. Hey, they can take that position. That's fine. But I do point that out vigorously, and I think I have for years. When white people use these victims as character witnesses, oh man, that is not cool at all. In my view, that's like us being on the slave ship, which we are, and they got the plank, from the slave ship. They make you walk the plank so the sharks or whatever can get you, or you just drown or whatever. But they got you near the plank and say, come here, Leroy. They drag you over, got your hands cuffed and everything. Don't you think we feed all of y'all well? What's he going to say? Nah, man, you've been starving all us and you've been sodomizing half of us. I seen what you're doing. And nah, man. I don't think so. No, I'm not going to say all that. What you want me to say? It's been great. It's the best food I've ever had. Like, wow. Nutritious. It's filling. It's tasty. Like, I mean, what's he going to say? That is us in the system of white supremacy, racism. And you couple that with, we are so poorly. How many non-white people do you know have read Buried in the Bitter Water? Okay. How many black people do you know have actually read Neely Fuller Jr.? I know lots of black people. I'm down with Brother Fuller and Dr. Fuller. Now, actually reading what he I'm going to get to them. 2026, I'm going to have some free time. I'm going to cut that Netflix off. I'm going to see what Brother Fuller wrote. How many black people you know actually read Caste? Turner Diaries? Sundown Towns? We are not informed, and I might even humbly stick my chest out, because those are all books that I didn't just read, I highlighted. Listening to the audio books exclusively does not count. I go back and look at my highlights for those books on a regular basis. Any hoodles, holiday cheer. Ishaka Musa Barashango, I saw his book about European holidays today. For sure, better use of time and energy as opposed to foolishness and decorating the tree and presents and unnecessary shopping and what have you. We are under a system of white supremacy, racism. Really, you should go back and look at those reports where they had the bombing of the cellular phone towers that were right near Christmas a few years back by some of the Turner Diaries type white people. Go back and look at that. Make sure you've got water and everything stored up in case the power goes out, because they just arrested that group. Was the Turtle Island Liberation Front? They were planning to have IEDs and explosive attacks for New Year's Eve and such. That's next week. Maybe make sure you're informed about all that and then stocked up in case white people go back to attacking the electrical grid and such that they were doing here past few years. That was during the middle of the Rona. In fact, this time of year, end of the year, fireworks going off, they won't be able to tell the difference. Any hoodles. All right, Victim, did you have anything else, sir?
Yes, it was good to hear Justice's voice on the buckets of words, and you brought up a good point about Mr. Devitt going into the quote-unquote black neighborhoods and delivering food. It's like more of a PSA for, not eating out and cooking our own food. But that's it for me, Gus. Thank you for taking my call.
Great point. I totally forgot that. I totally forgot about that. Like, yeah, that would be the type of person who would be fondling your goodies if you're not cooking your own victuals and such and ordering out. Like, yes, that is a totally additional hazard for letting white people, racists, fondle our food. Yeah, Minister Malcolm told us about that some time ago. Again, like I said, I'm not sure how I would have processed that when I was a little bit more confused in terms of, it's almost like he's bragging about Yeah, I drive the poor niggers around, deliver. You are still a racist suspect, man. It almost felt a little bit like I got black friends, I got, black cousin or black girlfriend, or I adopted a black pro. I don't know. I could be talking crazy. Maybe I ate too much peppermint candy, whatever. But if he had been an Uber driver and he was not driving black people, would he have told us? Because he told us a bunch, right? Like, would he have told us 2-3 times if he was just driving like white people? I don't know. Anyway, I'll think about it. The definition part was massive, though, because he wasted all that time. It could have just been a quick no. He had to do all that and then to come back and he flex his knowledge and expertise. I'm an informed white man about racism. Duh. Anyway, we'll be here Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Stay as safe as possible under conditions of white supremacy. Man, especially now, they will have sobriety checkpoints out. If you live close to a racially restricted region and you are classified as black, oh man, stay indoors. Even if you don't live near one of those, I would not be out like late. Once it's after like 9:30, 10 o'clock, it's dark. I would not be out and about for like the next week and a half or so. Like, nope. Stay in, get whatever you need during the daytime or what have you, especially if you are a younger motorist. You haven't been driving that long. No way, man. Do what you got to do in the daytime. If you got a party, meet up with your friends or do anything, get to one spot and stay there. They certainly got Uber, but real talk, I would not want to be out. We've been partying or what have you, and I'm in the back of an Uber, and we get stopped by enforcement officers. That's not cool either. None of that. I would really try and minimize as best you can having to be out late so you don't have contact with enforcement officers or even really white people, no badge, but they got their nigger knocker or they got their fire. He said the militia, man, like, oh my God. And I said they have the fireworks and such. They could be out. They do that. Go out where they got the camouflage because they got all the fireworks and people are distracted. And hey, we can go out and do what we want to. Shoot up the electrical grid, all this other foolishness. They had the pipe bomb attacks here in Washington State. We just talked about that. Get to one spot and stay there. Dangerous times. Racism, white supremacy is war. I ain't heard about no Negro militia. I've heard lots about white militias, and they are not pleased. Creator, remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Why you say that, Gus? Well, we can't pick out who are the racists and who are the well-meaning white people. We can't even differentiate. Or 400 racial purges in Pennsylvania alone. Steel curtain on that. I have so much more respect for Mike Tomlin now. Jesus Christ. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Mm-hmm. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.